Chapter 30. No wonder the top brass hadn't said anything. They were waiting for the big boss. Duan. Director Duan? Y.A. Erlin's voice trembled even more. Didn't she go to Huangju? How would I know? Duang didn't know what to do. They knew the company wouldn't let this go easily, but things had turned out a little differently. Someone from Pegasus must have snitched. Y.A. Erlin voiced his speculation. Regardless, let's get ready. I'll contact Fang Zhao. We'll head to the top floor together. On the 50th floor, Fang Zhao was watching the news online. He was a little surprised when he received Duang's notification. He hadn't expected the big boss to blow up. Fang Zhao straightened his wrinkled clothes and told the others, "You guys take a break. I'm heading up for a meeting." "Which floor?" Zhu Wen asked. "Top floor conference room." "Top floor?" Zhu Wen jumped out of his seat. "Bro, here's a piece of advice. When you meet the big boss, remember these words: cut the crap and tell the truth." Silver Wing's current boss was Duan Chenji, the granddaughter of Silver Wing's founder, Duan Yizhi. She was in her 70s. Rumor had it that when Duan Yizhi was still alive, a young Duan Chenji had followed him around on screen. When Duan Yizhi passed away, Duan Chenji took over Silver Wing. Fang Zhao recalled the information he'd researched. The information online was limited, and there were traces of manipulation. Fang Zhao had never met the real Duan Chenji, so he wasn't sure. He could only guess from Zhu Wen and Duang's reactions that the boss had a short fuse and wasn't the type to smile often. Love Go Little Say Net WK. The regular staff elevator couldn't reach the top floor. Fang Zhao followed Duang and the others to another elevator. The higher they went, the more nervous Duang and the others became. At first, Duang gave Fang Zhao a few reminders, but later he fell silent, as if his entire body had stiffened. The air around him seemed to have dropped. The elevator doors opened into a 5-meter-wide passageway. The surrounding walls glowed with a cold, metallic sheen. Even the sunlight streaming in through the windows couldn't dispel the formless chill. After verifying their identities, an expressionless young man raised his hand, indicating that they could pass. Fang Zhao noticed that the man's gaze lingered on him for a few more seconds. When they entered the conference room, the hushed chatter died down. More than 20 pairs of eyes turned to look at them. Everyone in the room was at least a manager's level. Small managers like Duang didn't have the right to attend meetings on a normal day. The scrutinizing gaze was like a giant invisible hand pressing down on them. Duang and the other two forced a stiff smile. They could almost hear their own hearts beating like drums in their ears. Receiving a signal from his direct superior, Duang walked over to the 4 seats at the end of the table. Their positions were the lowest, so they had to sit at the end. The conference table was in the shape of an inverted V. The seat at the front belonged to the big boss, but it was empty now. Other than that, there was another empty seat next to the big boss, but no one knew who it was for. Fang Zhao did not feel nervous. He was just sizing up the conference room and guessing what attitude the big boss would have. If the big boss was not satisfied with them, he would not compromise. At most, he would leave and poach the entire project team. He believed that many companies would be more than happy to hire them. They sat down for less than a minute. Before other curious executives could ask any questions, the conference room door opened again. The conference room, which had been noisy with the arrival of Fang Zhao and the other 3, quieted down again. It was so quiet that breathing could be heard clearly. It wasn't a pause out of curiosity when Fang Zhao and the others arrived. It was a pause due to the seriousness and pressure of the situation. Fang Zhao saw an unsmiling woman stride in. Perhaps because of the extended lifespans in the new era, although Duan Chenji was nearing 80, she looked like she was in her 40s before the apocalypse. She had some wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, but she was in good spirits. Behind Duan Chenji were 4 people, 2 secretaries and 2 assistants. Their faces were expressionless, but they were gentler and less stern than Duan Chenji. An old man came in with Duan Chenji. After Duan Chenji sat down at the head of the table, the old man sat down in another empty seat. Fang Zhao scanned the old man's chest. There was a winged horse logo on his chest. He was from Flying Pegasus. Who's Fang Zhao? Du Enchanting asked as soon as she sat down. Du Ang hung his head. He tapped Fang Zhao with his hand under the table, signaling him to stand up. His other hand discreetly wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He breathed a sigh of relief. Since she asked Fang Zhao first, did that mean she wasn't as mad at them for taking matters into their own hands? I am. Fang Zhao stood up. Fang Zhao's seat moved away from the original V-shaped table and into an empty space in the middle of the table, toward the head of the table. Du Enchanting observed Fang Zhao's reaction the whole time. If it were any other newcomer attending a meeting on the top floor for the first time, the slightest movement would have triggered a heightened tension. But not Fang Zhao. Not only was he not nervous, but he also observed the change with curiosity. The stares didn't faze him at all. He wasn't your average newcomer. His composure was uncharacteristic of someone his age. Did you write Divine Punishment? Du Enchanting's scrutinizing gaze was trained on Fang Zhao. Yes. It's my original work, Fang Zhao said, not avoiding Du Enchanting's scrutinizing gaze. Du Enchanting didn't detect any signs of lying. Her expression softened a little. How many more movements are there in your plan for the 100-year period of destruction? 3 more. Gasps echoed in the room. Their reactions were the same as Du Ang's. The old man from Flying Pegasus next to Du Enchanting wanted to say something, but Du Enchanting raised her hand. He stopped, but his eyes were anxious. Are the movements finished? Du Enchanting asked. No. I'm out of funds. Another round of gasps could be heard. Du Ang and the other two hung their heads even lower. You're asking for money right in front of the big boss. You've got guts, kid. Du Enchanting was silent for 2 seconds. A rare smile flashed in her eyes. 50 million for the second movement and the music video. I want to see the finished product before November. Sure. Du Enchanting thought of something and asked, who's the eye model for the music video? Me. Consultant team? Myself. Everyone stared at Fang Zhao as if he were a freak. The manager in charge of the film and television department rolled his eyes and lowered his eyelids. No one knew what he was thinking. This time, Du Enchanting was silent for a little longer. From now on, you're the manager of the virtual projects department and the producer of the Polar Light project team. You're in charge of personnel transfers. Zhu Zhun will contact you about the rewards for the Polar Light project team after the meeting. An assistant behind Du Enchanting stepped forward and smiled at Fang Zhao. The company gives preferential treatment to talented people. As if trying to calm Fang Zhao down, Du Enchanting noticed Fang Zhao was still deep in thought. She asked, any other questions? One more. Shoot. Can I bring a dog to work? Chapter 31. Du Ang hung his head even lower. The atmosphere suddenly froze. The conference room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The invisible pressure made Du Ang and the others breathe cautiously. Can you bring a dog to work? This was the first time they'd heard someone ask a question in front of their boss in a top-floor office. Kid, are you trying to go to heaven? Bringing a dog? Do you want to be led by a dog? With such a good opportunity, shouldn't he ask for more benefits and fight for more benefits for himself? What's going on in your head? Sure enough, he was still too young. Or perhaps, the minds of people who dabbled in art were different from ordinary people. No wonder you're capable of producing epic works. The conference room was silent for half a minute. Du Enchanting, sitting at the head of the table, said slowly, sure. I've said it before, the company gives preferential treatment to talented people. Of course, that didn't mean you could do whatever you wanted with a dog. It was limited to the 50th floor. The entire virtual projects department was Fang Zhao's turf. He could decide what to do. Du Enchanting only wanted one result. As long as he delivered a satisfactory result, she wouldn't say anything if Fang Zhao wanted to bring a zoo to work, let alone a dog. That settles the virtual projects department. I want to see the release of the second movement by November. All right, the 4 of you can leave, Du Enchanting said. Du Ang looked up at his old boss. Receiving manager Sha's gaze, Du Ang was sure Du Enchanting was referring to the 4 of them. She meant the 4 of them were done here and could leave. The rest of the meeting wasn't for them to listen to. Tugging at Fang Zhao, who had returned to his seat, Duang and the others left the conference room. As for what happened after they left, it was none of their business. Duang and the other two exhaled deeply when they stepped into the elevator. It was as if they'd come back to life. Ya Erlin patted his chest. That was scary. Scary. Hey, Fang Zhao, weren't you scared? Why would I be? Fang Zhao asked. Julian looked at Fang Zhao, who looked no different than when he'd arrived. He recalled Fang Zhao's daring question in the conference room. Then he looked at Ya Erlin, who was still drenched in cold sweat. He shook his head. They were both artists, but how could they be so different? No matter what, Fang Zhao, congratulations on your promotion, Julian said with a smile. In the past, they could still put on airs based on their positions, but from the moment they left the conference room, Fang Zhao's status was no longer lower than theirs. Just based on his position, he was even higher than the three of them. It was just that he didn't have much power now. But if Fang Zhao succeeded with the second movement? Fang Zhao. Duang tightened his grip on Fang Zhao's arm. His eyes shone with a strange light. None of the apprehension he'd felt when he'd entered the conference room was replaced by excitement and disbelief. Fang Zhao. The second movement must succeed. Duang wasn't angry that his job had been stolen. He could tell from the look in his boss's eyes that he would be compensated handsomely. Plus, he didn't want to stay in the virtual projects department, so he didn't feel bad about it. Something came to his mind. In the new era, commercial entertainment had never been limited to one industry. Whether it was real idols or virtual idols, they were never limited to the music industry. The music industry was just a corner of the entertainment circle. It had always been a pan-entertainment strategy. Take the virtual idols at Neon Culture and Tongshan True Entertainment for example. After their songs achieved some success, they moved on to film and television. Silver Wing's other real-life idols followed a similar path. But since Silver Wing's founding, there had never been a virtual idol that received such strong support from the company. But as he left the conference room today, Duang sensed something was amiss. Why would Duan Chenji give Fang Zhao such preferential treatment? He believed that if it had been anyone else at Flying Pegasus Studio, they might not have received the same treatment. There had to be more to come. But there wouldn't be any big moves until the second movement was out. Now we're just waiting for your second movement. Only when the second movement was a success could Duang be sure of his theory. Fang Zhao didn't know how long the penthouse meeting lasted after they left. Anyway, less than an hour after he returned to the 50th floor, Silver Wing's chief spokesperson brought up the Polar Light project in an interview. He still had that perfect smile on his face, making it impossible to tell what he was thinking. He didn't divulge much information. All he said was to wait for the release of the second movement. He didn't announce a specific release date. He maintained his mysterious demeanor, but Duang was willing to bet that this time, the spokesperson sounded more confident. Duan Chenji's assistant, Zhu Zhen, had already sent Fang Zhao a list of rewards. Zheng Huang, WNU, Song Miao, and Pang Pusong were each getting a bonus of $100,000. Zhu Wen, the core technician, got $300,000. Fang Zhao, the producer, got $1 million. That was just the bonus. The cut from the sales of the songs would be settled next month. Funding was in place. They could start work at any time. After consulting with Zheng Huang, WNU, and Pang Pusong, Fang Zhao changed their contracts to official Silver Wing employees. Pang Pusong felt his back straighter now that he was an official employee. After signing the contract, he immediately called his mom to tell her he was going to buy her a present. Song Miao was planning to use the money to buy the dress she'd seen last time. Zheng Huang and WNU were wondering if they should buy the apartment they were eyeing. Zhu Wen, what are you going to buy? Zheng Huang asked when he noticed Zhu Wen sitting there in silence. Me. I already bought one. Zhu Wen turned on the screen on his bracelet and showed everyone a panel. He said proudly, upgrade your equipment. What's the point of gaming if you don't upgrade your equipment? Zheng Huang. As long as you're happy. What are you going to buy, boss? Zhu Wen asked Fang Zhao. Even the way he addressed Fang Zhao had changed. Fang Zhao read the text message he'd just received. Chairman's assistant, Zhu Zhen, says 2 more flying cars will be arriving soon. She wants us to check the garage and make sure there's nothing blocking the way. More flying cars? Zhu Wen didn't even bother upgrading his equipment. He jogged to the garage. Every floor above the 20th floor had a garage. Of course, the 50th floor had one as well. It was just that the department had gone through a bloodbath. Only a few people were left, and they were dirt poor. Things had changed after Fang Zhao arrived, but money was tight. Renting equipment had to be done by the hour, or it would be overcharged. Now they had money. I checked. The garage is empty. Zhu Wen opened the garage door. A short while later, the people in charge of delivering the cars left behind 2 flying cars with silver wings emblazoned on them. They were also company cars, but these 2 were much nicer than the one Fang Sheng had ridden in on the Black Street. It wasn't that Silver Wings cars were necessarily better than Neon Cultures. The grade depended on status and the company's attitude. The higher the status, the more the company valued the person, and the better the car. The 2 flying cars were department property, not personal property. They were there for the convenience of the department's employees in case of an emergency. They didn't have to ask other departments for help. Zhu Wen felt the 2 flying cars from top to bottom, not leaving a single wheel unturned. I've decided not to game today. I'm going for a drive. Boss, didn't you say you were going home? I'll give you a ride, Zhu Wen said. Fang Zhao had given them the day off. Tomorrow, they would have to start another round of overtime. They would probably be living in the office for a long time. But there were only a few of them on the entire floor. Each of them had their own office, and it was still spacious. There were lounges, too. They didn't feel like it was a hardship. Fang Zhao didn't mistreat them in terms of food. Although the set meal from the company cafeteria wasn't the best, it wasn't bad. It was already dark by the time Zhu Wen drove Fang Zhao to the Black Street. Fang Zhao didn't let Zhu Wen drive the car down. There were more people on the Black Street at night than during the day. There were all kinds of vehicles, too. Zhu Wen's driving skills were only average. It wasn't safe, so Fang Zhao got off at a bus stop. He took the elevator to the bottom floor of the Black Street and walked down the street to his apartment. Black Street was a little busier at night. Many of the street lamps were broken and hadn't been replaced. The only source of light came from the storefronts on either side. Fang Zhao walked down the street. Just as he was thinking about the production of the second movement, he suddenly stopped. He was at a corner of the street. There were no shops on either side. The street lamps were broken, so it was dark. He was about 100 meters away from the bustling streets. What made Fang Zhao stop were the 4 men in front of him. One of them was holding a gun, and the muzzle was pointed at Fang Zhao. All 4 of them were wearing black masks, and their voices were muffled. Be smart and transfer 1,000 to this account. One of them, a young man in a biker suit, was holding a card with an account ID written on it in shiny paint. One look and Fang Zhao knew he was a repeat offender. He was good at transferring illegal accounts. Fang Zhao couldn't help but laugh. Even during the day, when he'd learned about his promotion and the fact that he could mobilize the resources of other departments to produce the second movement, he hadn't laughed when everyone was complimenting him. How long had it been since someone pointed a gun at him? Fang Zhao couldn't remember. The man with the gun didn't know how to laugh. He was curious about Fang Zhao's reaction. Shouldn't a normal person be trembling in fear and obediently transferring the money? Crazy. Crazy. The 4 men sized Fang Zhao up again. Forget it. Robbing is the most important thing. Transfer the money. Hurry up. The man with the gun urged. You just got the gun today, right? Fang Zhao walked over to the man with the gun. Huh. Stop. I'll shoot if you keep going. First time holding a gun? Fang Zhao kept walking. None of your business. Stop. Do you hear me? Your hands are trembling. I said, I'll shoot if you keep going. Do you know what people like you were called in my era? The 4 men looked at Fang Zhao. They didn't understand what this guy, who was about the same age as them, meant. Chapter 32. Bang. The gunshots weren't loud in the dark corner, and the noisy black street at night didn't attract much attention. Some shops that were playing deafening music were even more clueless. Yu Qing, who was collecting money at the counter, suddenly raised his head and looked in the direction of the gunshot. Others might not have been able to detect it, but he could tell from the noise. He couldn't hear it clearly, but his intuition told him that it was a gunshot. There were quite a lot of people in the shop, but Yu Qing didn't go out. He still sat at the counter, adjusted the angle of the surveillance camera at the entrance, and looked at the screen. There was still some distance from the corner, and the surveillance camera at the entrance of the shop had a limited range. Some middle school students on skateboards passed by on the black street, laughing and chatting. It was not them. A few drunkards had their arms around each other's shoulders and were shouting something. It was not them either. Yu Qing looked at the person who appeared on the screen. Fang Zhao. Fang Zhao was still carrying something in his hand. Yu Qing zoomed in and saw that it was just a box from a barbecue shop not far away. Not long after, Fang Zhao appeared at Yu Qing's shop. "You've been working overtime until now?" Yu Qing asked with a smile, but there was a hidden look in his eyes. "I've been busy lately, but I'll be even busier in the future. Starting tomorrow, I might not be back for many days in a row. I'll be working overtime at the office." Fang Zhao opened the box and handed Yu Qing a piece of barbecued meat. "Want some?" "Thanks. Their barbecued meat is pretty good. The meat is sourced from Muzhou, not synthetic meat." Yu Qing smiled widely at the thought of food. He even took out a bottle of wine from the shelf and poured a glass for Fang Zhao. "Did you get a bonus?" Yu Qing asked. The barbecued meat was not cheap. Most of the food here was compressed synthetic food. Natural barbecued meat was considered a luxury on the Black Street. A palm-sized piece of meat cost 200 or 300 yuan. Yu Qing could only eat it twice a month. "Yeah, that's why I'm being extravagant." Fang Zhao handed over another piece. "By the way, the new song you released is quite nice. I've downloaded it. The music video was also not bad. I recommended it to my old comrades and they all liked it. I saw on the news today that your second song is coming out." Yu Qing asked. "That's why I have to work overtime in the future. I have high hopes for you. We are all waiting, haha." Fang Zhao bought 10 pieces of barbecued meat. He and Yu Qing ate 3 pieces each and left 3 pieces for Rewan. Rewan was busy at the moment and had no time to come over. He asked Fang Zhao to keep it for him. When he was free, he would come over to Yu Qing's place. Fang Zhao brought the remaining piece of barbecued meat upstairs. Inside the shop, Yu Qing slapped his forehead. He had forgotten to ask Fang Zhao if he had seen anything unusual around the corner. But it probably had nothing to do with Fang Zhao, so who was it? Yu Qing pulled up the surveillance footage and looked at the people who had passed through the surveillance area. Tonight, when the sky had just turned dark, there was a situation on the street behind. It was a vendetta, but no one was killed. Yu Qing also heard that someone had lost a gun in the incident. However, this kind of thing like losing a gun wouldn't be mentioned openly. After all, those people didn't own guns legally. The guns were all from illegal workshops. They weren't registered, so even if they were lost, they wouldn't dare say it out loud. He just didn't know who had picked up the gun in the end. The gunshot from the corner earlier should be related to the missing gun. Who could it be? Yu Qing looked at the surveillance footage and still couldn't find any suspicious characters. In the end, he gave up. Who cared? As long as they didn't provoke him, it was fine. Fang Zhao was already upstairs. When he opened the door, he saw the curly-haired dog wagging its tail energetically. The smell of barbecued meat made it even more excited and whimpered non-stop. Fang Zhao scanned the interior of the house. He didn't see anything damaged. He rubbed the dog's head. Not bad. After placing the barbecued meat on the dog's plate, Fang Zhao shut the windows and curtains. He took off his jacket and fished out the pistol he kept inside. This gun was considered a relatively old model, but compared to Fang Zhao's era, it was still quite a bit more advanced. There were many modifications. Fang Zhao fished out a severely deformed bullet from another pocket. Thus, While Yu Qing stared at the surveillance footage for any suspicious characters and guessed who had picked up the lost gun, Fang Zhao was upstairs studying the gun he had robbed. It had been too long since his era. He still didn't know how to use modern firearms. He had to do more research. The next day, Fang Zhao brought the curly-haired dog downstairs to Yu Qing's shop. He might be sleeping in the office for a long time, so he had to ask Yu Qing to keep an eye on the second floor. Rewan was there too. He was telling Yu Qing about the 4 youngsters who had visited his pharmacy last night. The 4 youngsters had been petty thieves since they were in school. They had even learned how to rob people. Now that they weren't in school, they were still doing it. Because their previous robberies had been outsiders, they hadn't robbed much, and they hadn't killed anyone. The people in the Black Street had turned a blind eye. But last night, it seemed like they had met a tough nut to crack. The 4 of them had been beaten so badly that even their mothers wouldn't recognize them. Rewan asked them what had happened. At first, the 4 didn't say anything, but in the end, Rewan tricked them into spitting out a few words. I'm guessing the 4 youngsters were the ones who picked up the guns, but they kept their mouths shut about who beat them up. The 4 youngsters only had flesh wounds. They look terrible, but they'll suffer for a while. It's no big deal. The person who beat them up just wanted to teach them a lesson. Were those the 4 youngsters who opened fire at the corner yesterday? Yu Qing asked. No way. Those 4 youngsters had never held a gun before. They didn't dare fire it. Even if they dared, they didn't have the chance. They were beaten to the ground before they could get a good look. The shot was fired by the person who beat them. It was probably just to scare them. One of them even peed his pants. I could smell it when he came to my shop, Rewan commented, shaking his head. Seeing Fang Zhao walk over, Rewan greeted him with a smile. Yesterday's barbecue was delicious. I heard you have to work overtime. Don't worry, old Yu and I are keeping an eye on things. No one will dare break your windows. Next time you get a bonus, you can treat us to a barbecue. Sure, no problem, Fang Zhao agreed and didn't say much else. He was in a hurry. Go on, go on. Don't worry. Yu Qing tossed Fang Zhao a bag of hardtacks. Save it for the road. Thanks. Fang Zhao put the biscuits in his pocket and left in a hurry with curly hair. Watching Fang Zhao walk away, Rewan asked Yu Qing, do you think there's any outsider in our area with that kind of ability? Yu Qing pointed at Fang Zhao's departing figure. Do you think it's possible? Rewan shook his head. Him? He's an artist. How could it be possible? I heard those 4 youngsters say that the person who beat them up probably held a gun before. Old Yu, you're the only retired soldier on this street, right? Yu Qing didn't think it could be Fang Zhao. I'll get someone to check how many new tenants there are. Fang Zhao left the Black Street. Public trains didn't allow pets, so he called a taxi and applied for a pet identification. His name was Curly Hair. A dog would only be considered an owner after being implanted with a microchip. The microchip under the skin was proof of identity. No matter where it went, Fang Zhao would be able to locate it. Some places that could scan the microchip could also obtain information on the pet's identity and ownership. After completing the application, Fang Zhao brought the dog to the office. Many employees on the first floor were surprised to see Fang Zhao bringing a dog to work. They realized that Fang Zhao hadn't been stopped. The security guards only glanced at him before looking away. They had no intention of stopping him. Did I see that right? The person who just passed by was Fang Zhao? Yes, he even brought a dog. Are all the newcomers these days so good? He's younger than you, but he can already produce epic works. You're all lagging behind. According to the latest news, Fang Zhao has been promoted. Fang Zhao ignored the chatter as he entered the elevator. He was in contact with Bu Lai. This body is still too weak. I need more training. Oh, Manager Fang, congratulations on your promotion. Blai's old face smiled amiably. Thanks. What's up? Do you need equipment? I can talk to the people in the equipment department and ask them to help you keep the things and not lend them out. No, I'm just asking if there's any gym equipment. I think there is. You can order one if you don't have it. But the company already has a gym. Are you thinking of setting up another one? That's an idea. No problem. There's plenty of space on your floor anyway. Is there anything else you need? I'll order it. Do you have gaming equipment? Manager Fang, are you here for work? It's best if it's a gun simulation for shooting games. Fang Zhao, are you here for work? Don't be too old. The newer the better. Fang Zhao, are you here for work? Chapter 33. Bu Lai could decide on the fitness equipment, but when it came to gaming equipment, Bu Lai did not dare make any decisions. The way he saw it, Fang Zhao was still young. Youngsters lacked willpower. If Fang Zhao was addicted to gaming and did not do his job properly, resulting in a failure to complete his mission or a drop in quality, Bu Lai would be the scapegoat. Therefore, he had to consult his superiors about the gaming equipment. He could not make the decision himself. Bu Lai's men were efficient and had all the necessary equipment. The equipment, tools, and manpower were readily available. Installation was quick. That afternoon, the Virtual Projects Department on the 50th floor gained a new 100-square-meter gym. Our own gym? Zhu Wen was excited. Sometimes, when he was tired from working, he wanted to move, but all he could do was hop a couple of times. Too many people went to the company's public gym, and he had to line up for reservations. As a tech nerd, he had a weak physique. His parents often told him to exercise more, not to spend all his time gaming and work. Exercise was the key to life. Now that his department had its own gym, he did not have to squeeze in with others. Actually, I applied to buy gaming equipment, Fang Zhao said. Zhu Wen's ears perked up and he asked expectantly, and then? It was rejected. Zhu Wen slumped back down. The higher-ups say that if we succeed with the second movement, they might agree, Fang Zhao continued. Then let's do it. Zhu Wen pumped his fists. He suddenly felt like he had found a new, shining goal in life. He was full of energy. To him, gaming equipment was more attractive than the prize money. Fang Zhao had already transmitted the detailed plans for the Polar Light project and assigned tasks to everyone. He did not restrict everyone's working hours and allowed them to do as they pleased. As long as there were no mistakes and they could complete the tasks according to the plan, it was up to everyone to decide how to allocate their time. The project team held a meeting every 3 days to tally up progress and resolve problems. That morning, Fang Zhao was running on the treadmill. The treadmill was responsive. Whether it accelerated or decelerated depended on Fang Zhao. The curly-haired dog followed beside Fang Zhao's feet. When Fang Zhao ran fast, the curly-haired dog followed suit. When Fang Zhao ran slow, the curly-haired dog slowed down and was not thrown off by the treadmill. Fang Zhao read the industry news as he jogged. Prairie Fire, one of the most popular media outlets in the industry, had been eyeing Silver Wing's Polar Light project for the past 2 days. Yesterday, they had announced that they would be inviting an industry professional to review the Polar Light project. This time, it wasn't those who were involved in scientific research or history. It was a great master in the music industry. Yes, a great master who liked to shoot off his mouth. He was indeed talented, but it was also true that he talked a lot. Professionals naturally analyzed from a professional point of view. Patry himself studied symphonies, and Fang Zhao's Divine Punishment was a symphonic structure. This was also why Prairie Fire had invited Patry on the show. What a perfect candidate for stirring up the topic. Patry didn't belittle Divine Punishment. On the contrary, he praised it from beginning to end. He analyzed every part of it and gave it a very high evaluation. Of course, he didn't forget to belittle some of his peers as well. As usual, it was uncomfortable not to incur hatred. Only when there were a few would it feel good. The show also sparked a lot of discussion. What surprised many was that Neon Culture and Tongshan True Entertainment also praised the epic song Divine Punishment on their official live shows. They didn't seem the least bit angry that their virtual idols had been pushed off the charts. They praised Divine Punishment to the heavens and admitted that they too were looking forward to Polar Light's second movement. They speculated that it would also be an epic, on par with Divine Punishment. This kind of coverage wasn't limited to just Qian City. Online discussions could be heard every day. Once the buzz died down, it would be hyped up again. There was a force behind it. Duang felt things weren't looking good either. Tongshan True Entertainment and Neon Culture had probably teamed up to hype it up. The studios of the big three would study the other two whenever they had time. They had a good understanding of their opponents' styles and tactics. Neon Culture's Metal Frenzy and Tongshan True Entertainment's Four Dimensions must have noticed the differences between Divine Punishment and Flying Pegasus' previous compositions. They figured someone else was the composer of Divine Punishment. That's why they used this method to test the waters. Fang Zhao might have already been traced back to Silver Wing. They might even have already found out about Fang Zhao. Silver Wing was not a monolithic entity. If they wanted to pry, they could always pry some information out. The higher the praise, the harder the fall. It's too much praise. Given Fang Zhao's age, he would either be conceited or burdened by his reputation after reading the reports and hearing the praise of so many masters. Either way, the second movement would be affected. Epic and trash could be determined by the whims of the composer. Internally, people who were familiar with the Polar Light project knew that Duan Qianji had not allowed anyone from Flying Pegasus to interfere. This meant that all the movements of the Polar Light project would be composed by Fang Zhao alone. No one from Flying Pegasus would be involved. If it's yours, it's yours. No one can take credit for it. Although virtual idol projects usually didn't include the composer's name in the first place, the composer's name would be revealed later on through other channels. Just like the music produced by the Flying Pegasus studio, there might be individual compositions in them, but at the beginning, they were all released in the form of a studio, emphasizing the Flying Pegasus as a whole. Only later would they release which music was composed by one or a few of them. Only by raising the value of Flying Pegasus could the value of its members rise. Similarly, Fang Zhao wanted to promote Polar Light as a virtual idol. For now, Polar Light was the focus. Once Polar Light was a hit, he would announce the composer. If Polar Light was released with Divine Punishment, and the composer's name was Fang Zhao's, then Fang Zhao would divert attention from Polar Light's image. Duan Qianji had given Fang Zhao a choice, and Fang Zhao had chosen to go it alone. She had agreed and blocked Flying Pegasus's team. Now, it wasn't just the outside world. Inside Silver Wing, Duan Qianji and other senior executives were also paying attention. Could Fang Zhao carry on the epic all by himself? Of course, if Fang Zhao felt that he wasn't capable enough and needed additional support, Duan Qianji would let Flying Pegasus's team join in. But when the time came, Flying Pegasus would be announcing the composer and not Fang Zhao himself. The rest of the Polar Light project team had also seen the news. Should we hire another consultant? Zheng Huang asked. He was worried that Fang Zhao would be under too much pressure. The pressure from the top of the company and the constant flattery from the outside would drive a weak-willed person crazy. If Fang Zhao went into seclusion to compose, he might be able to avoid some interference, but he would have to find another consultant. That's right, boss. Why don't you just go into seclusion and focus on composing? The consultant can hire another person or team, Zhu Wen suggested. If Fang Zhao had really been a youngster in his early 20s, he would surely have been affected by all the adulation. He might have become conceited or crumbled under the pressure. But Fang Zhao wasn't like that. He hadn't lived more than 100 years in his past life in vain. He had experienced countless near-death situations. This bit of pressure was far from enough to sway him. Chapter 34. We provide you with exciting novels to read. Fang Zhao could compose and direct on his own, but the others on the project team did not have Fang Zhao's mental fortitude. They were affected by the internal and external pressure. Even Zhu Wen made some unnecessary mistakes. There are still too few people. Fang Zhao looked at everyone's progress during the team meeting that was held once every 3 days. Sorry, I haven't been as focused lately. But there are still too few people. The music video for the second movement is more complicated than the first. It will be difficult to complete it within a month while maintaining the quality. After starting on the second movement, Zhu Wen realized that the difficulty of the second movement was higher. He was still a little weak in terms of control of the scene. He would always make mistakes, but he did not feel at ease leaving it to the technical staff of the other departments. Yes, it would be best if we could find a few more reg dimension technicians, the kind that are good at scene control. Zheng Huang had the same opinion as Zhu Wen. Even though they had borrowed a few technicians from other departments, they were not from their own department. Sometimes there would be conflicts, and Zheng Huang could not direct them. Let's hire a few more, Song Miao suggested. She had not been a part of the virtual idol project before, but after the first movement was released, she had applied to be transferred over and officially became a staff member. Only the insiders would put in more effort and put all their effort into this project. Zhu Wen, do you have any recommendations? Fang Zhao looked at Zhu Wen. Inside or outside the company? Zhu Wen asked. Internal. The Polar Light project had attracted a lot of attention. Recruiting someone from outside might not be reliable, so it was best to find someone from within the company. Got it. I'll ask. Zhu Wen and the other technical people all had their own chat groups. There were a few that Zhu Wen was familiar with. Last year, due to the huge investment in the virtual reality project, too many people had been squeezed in, and they had been squeezed out. Now that the department was restarting, and since they were recruiting, they had to ask if they were willing to come back. Fang Zhao also posted an announcement on the company's intranet forum, Virtual Idol Department on the 50th floor looking for reg dimension technicians. The announcement did not garner much response. Many people saw the announcement, but they were all in a wait-and-see state. Recently, there had been a lot of reports out there, and they had been too full of praises. If the second movement failed, they would be criticized even more harshly after it failed. When the situation was still unclear, they did not dare to make a rash decision. Can I change my career? Beiji asked his agent when he saw the announcement. The agent rejected the idea without a second thought. With your IQ, you should just sing. There are also many singers with high IQs. You think you're that kind of person? Beiji fell silent. Don't think too much. Go practice the new songs you got yesterday. I won't say anything if you help out on the 50th floor when you're free, but don't even think about changing careers. The reg space technology is too difficult. Beiji's agent recalled his youth. At that time, he also wanted to be a reg dimension technician. Unfortunately, he didn't have the talent. Just looking at those codes gave him a headache. G. Polan had no intention of changing careers, but he had already cleared his schedule for the next 10 days. He left a message with his agent, saying that he was going to the Virtual Projects Department on the 50th floor to observe and learn. This time, his agent did not have any objections. For one, the epic incident had brought some attention to G. Polan. More importantly, G. Polan's acting had improved a little. He did not know if it was because of the classes he had arranged for him or if he had really picked up some tricks from the 50th floor. Anyway, G. Polan said he could learn a lot from the Virtual Projects Department, so his agent agreed. The next day, Zhu Wen contacted 3 people. They were 2 men and 1 woman. All of them had worked in the Virtual Projects Department before being squeezed out and never returned. Even though the Polar Light project had been a success, they did not know what the atmosphere was like in the new department, so they did not say anything when they saw Fang Zhao's announcement. They only showed up when Zhu Wen contacted them. Besides the 3 of them, there was one more person who had come because of the announcement. My name is Rodney. I graduated from Yangzhou University of Science and Technology. I came to Silver Wing last year. This is my graduation certificate, transcripts from my 6 years in university, and these are proof of my awards. Rodney placed his various awards in front of Fang Zhao. After graduating last year, he had wanted to join Silver Wing's Virtual Projects Department. But the Virtual Projects Department had been in the midst of a big investment, and competition had been fierce. As a newcomer with no background, he had been unable to squeeze past the veterans, so he had settled for the next best thing and gone to the Film and Television Department. He had heard that the Virtual Projects Department was lacking people, so he had been tempted, but there had been no recruitment announcements, so he had not made any moves. Frankly speaking, Rodney had a lot of advantages. Yangzhou University of Science and Technology was one of Yenzhou's top schools, and the Reg Space Technology major was ranked well in the continent. Rodney's transcripts and awards were dazzling. There was no doubt that he was an outstanding graduate, perhaps even a top student. However, in a company like Silverwing, there were plenty of straight-A students. Every department had a few top-notch talents. Even Zhu Wen, who had always been inconspicuous, had a stellar record. This was also why, when the Virtual Idol project received a large investment from the company last year, Zhu Wen was able to stay. There was only one reason: his skills were exceptional. Speaking of which, Zhu Wen had also graduated from Yangzhou University of Science and Technology, just a few years ahead of Rodney. Fang Zhao sent Zhu Wen a message. "Have you heard of Rodney?" Zhu Wen, who was busy with Zheng Huang and the others, received the message and immediately replied, "Never heard of him." Fang Zhao did not ask further. He looked at Rodney's graduation work. His graduation work was a video he had produced himself, Army Ants Hunting During the Period of Destruction. During the period of destruction, the army ants had undergone some changes. They were faster and larger, and when their numbers increased, their destructive power was indeed terrifying. Rodney's video was probably made based on the descriptions in some documentaries and movies. There were many mistakes in the details, but overall, the fearless spirit of the group was very smooth. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been rated as an outstanding graduate work. Fang Zhao did not speak, and Rodney could not read Fang Zhao's expression. He rubbed his hands on his knees. Rodney did not know why. Even though the project producer before him was younger than him, he felt like he was facing an old tutor in school. He did not dare breathe, and his palms were sweaty from nervousness. "Do you want to play games?" Fang Zhao asked. "Huh?" Rodney was stumped by the sudden question. How many people in the field of Reg Space Technology could resist the temptation of games? But under the circumstances, this was not an easy question to answer. Play. What if he was criticized for not doing his job properly? Say no. It would be even worse if he was caught lying. Rodney hesitated for a moment before saying softly, "Play." "Actually, I'm playing." "You're hired." "Actually, I'm not bad." Rodney swallowed back the not much he had wanted to say. He was glad he had a quick brain and quick reflexes. "Fill in the application before 10 a.m. I'll bring your file over." "Yes, I'll do it as soon as I get back," Rodney replied, still shaken. "You have a day to rest. Come back tomorrow." "All right, I'll get it ready." Louder. "Can you stay in the office?" "Yes." "Pack your things and stay in the office." "Yes, sir." "Prepare to work overtime." "Yes, sir." "Any more questions?" "No." Dismissed. Rodney turned and walked into the elevator. He wiped the sweat off his forehead, suddenly feeling a little lost. Something was wrong. Chapter 35. The next day, Rodney arrived on the 50th floor, still in a daze. He didn't know if he had made the right decision. He had prepared a lot of questions the day before, but for some reason, he hadn't been able to ask any of them. He had just signed the contract and entered the elevator in a daze. After tidying up the private office Fang Zhao had assigned him, Rodney entered Zhu Wen's studio. "Nice to meet you, senior. I'm the newcomer, Rodney." Rodney prepared to introduce himself. "Cut the crap. Come over and help." Zhu Wen didn't even raise his head. He pointed to an empty space on the side, where a computer and other equipment had been placed. In the studio, in addition to Zhu Wen and Zheng Huang, there were 3 people who had been hired yesterday. Including Rodney, there were 6 people in total. The technicians that had been borrowed from other departments had been returned. From now on, the tasks of their department had to be completed internally. Although there were more people, the workload was still heavy. Today's plans had not been completed, so there was no time to welcome newcomers. Rodney didn't waste any time and went to his seat. He turned on the equipment and looked at the task assigned to him. He was very surprised. No wonder they were hiring people. There were too many things involved in a big scene, and the producers were strict with the details. They couldn't just fool around and had to be serious. Fang Zhao and Pang Pusong went to record the second song. They hadn't been satisfied with 2 consecutive days of recording, so they had to continue today. When it was close to noon, Zhu Wen's studio finished its morning's tasks, but Rodney didn't see Fang Zhao. Finally finished in time for lunch. Zhu Wen rubbed his face and stretched his eyes. I'm going to buy lunch, Zheng Huang said. It was his turn to buy lunch. After asking Rodney if he had any food restrictions, he left for the company cafeteria. Only then did Zhu Wen have time to look at the newcomer, Rodney. Newcomer? I heard you also graduated from Yangzhou University of Science and Technology. Zhu Wen asked. Yes, I've also heard about you, senior brother. Your graduation work is still in the school's exhibition hall, Rodney replied. Do a good job. Our department's future is bright. Following the boss won't go wrong. Zhu Wen started to boost morale. Boss means Fang Zhao. He's the boss of our department. Oh. Rodney nodded. After thinking for a while, Rodney asked again, Senior brother, don't you think that manager Fang looks like old man Shen? The old Shen Rodney was referring to was an old professor at the Yangzhou University of Science and Technology who taught reg space technology. He had a relatively high reputation in the industry, but he was too serious and had an air of low pressure wherever he went. Every batch of students taught by teacher Shen would have a very deep impression of him. They would never do anything else in this old man's class. Even if they couldn't bear to listen, they would pretend to listen attentively. This was all to make the old man feel slightly better. When the old man was in a bad mood, there was a possibility that the failure rate would increase. Rodney's senior brothers and sisters from the year before him had angered old Shen. Their failure rate had increased to 50%, and half of them had failed the final exam. Old Shen had refused to provide them with makeup exams, so those who had failed had to go to the same class as Rodney. This time, they had learned their lesson and barely passed the exam. Zhu Wen had graduated for 3 years, so he still had an impression of old man Shen. However, he was paying attention to the main point of Rodney's words. You actually dare say boss looks like an old man? Sure, I'm just saying his aura is similar, not that he looks old. Rodney waved his hands until his wrists were about to fall off. Anyway, you said it. I have to remember this dirt. No, I just feel that manager Fang is a little different. Rodney hurriedly explained. He felt that even though Fang Zhao was younger than them, he gave off a nervous feeling as if he was facing an old professor. Zhu Wen didn't mind. He's an artist. He's different from us technical people. There's always something different about him. As long as he can let us have a good life and let us play games during work, I don't care if he's a monster. That's true. Rodney tossed the strange feeling he had the day before to the back of his mind. Zhu Wen was right. As long as he was paid well and could play games during work, why bother about anything else? He just had to do his own thing. After all, if anything happened, the producer would take care of it. Oh right, senior brother, why is there a small urinal in the restroom? Does anyone in our department take care of kids? Rodney asked. Zhu Wen looked at Rodney as if he was an idiot. That's not for you or kids. It's for dogs. Oh. While Fang Zhao was adjusting Pang Pusong's vocals and Zhu Wen and the studio staff were working overtime, the demo for the second movement was in Duan Qianji's hands. Duan Qianji had told Fang Zhao to send a copy to her as soon as the demo was ready. She needed to check the quality. She spent half a day listening to the demo. It was just an incomplete, crudely produced demo, but Duan Qianji had been playing it on repeat all afternoon. She let out a long sigh and tapped her fingers on the table. Duan Qianji instructed her assistant, have He Hao and Wayne come up. We can start preparing for the next step. Zhu Zhen's eyes flashed with surprise. Yes, sir. It's time to let the world know that Silver Wing can still produce a virtual idol. A true idol. Duan Qianji said, gazing at the distant sunset. Boss, Master Glyphet's seems to be asking about the Aurora project as well. Zhu Zhen reported the information she received today. Glyphet's was the former head of Silver Wing's virtual idol department and project producer. Silver Wing had spent a lot of money to hire this virtual idol master last year. He had produced a few virtual idols of some renown in his younger days, but he no longer worked as a producer himself. Instead, he became a visiting professor at a number of higher education institutions, giving lectures from time to time, taking on apprentices, and participating in some investments. Last year, Silver Wing's generosity had moved the heart of this master, who had not personally worked on a project for a long time. Before the project had started, he had vowed that he would lift up Silver Wing's historically weak virtual projects, but reality had been a resounding slap in the face. Glyphets had fallen ill after the project failed last year. He had been hospitalized for more than a year, but he still hadn't been discharged. Last year, Duan Chenji massacred all the participants of the virtual idol project, and Glyphets was naturally angry. There were several students that Glyphets had strongly recommended to the project team, but Duan Chenji had forcefully purged them. When Duan Chenji mentioned Glyphets, Duan Chenji laughed mockingly. That old geezer, he's anxious. Of course Glyphets was anxious. Silver Wing's virtual idol project, which he had failed to lift, was showing signs of rising this year. Moreover, it was a hot topic in the industry as soon as it debuted. This was good for Silver Wing, but not good for Glyphets. If the Polar Light project was a success, the reputation Glyphets had built over the years would be tarnished. Chapter 36. The coastal city of Jingang boasted several large sanatoriums. Jingang had beautiful scenery, bright sunshine, and warm winters. Many people liked to recuperate in Jingang. At the same time, in a sanatorium in Jingang, famed musician and virtual idol producer Master Glyphets was sitting next to a floor-to-ceiling window in his room. This was usually the time of day when he was in the best mood, enjoying the Jingang sunshine in peace. But today, Glyphets was not in the mood for a warm sunbath that many people envied. Glyphets frowned deeply as he read the message sent to him by his assistant. Standing next to Glyphets was a former student, one of the students Duan Chenji had kicked out when the project failed last year. "Professor, has Silver Wing made a move yet?" the young man next to him asked. "Yeah." Glyphets closed his eyes. He had to figure out what Silver Wing was up to. Glyphets had been in charge of the project last year. He didn't fully understand Silver Wing's internal attitude, but he could guess at least half of it. Silver Wing had never placed much importance on virtual idols. This had been in place since the company's founding. Even now, Silver Wing didn't have a worthy virtual idol. Even if Silver Wing wanted to meddle in the virtual idol business for the sake of profit, it would take some time. At least, that was what Glyphets thought. Glyphets believed that the project's failure was Silver Wing's own internal problem, not his fault. But industry insiders and those who didn't know the truth were led by the media to believe that he was to blame for Silver Wing's failure last year. Ridiculous. Glyphets firmly denied that he was to blame. He had even said in familiar circles, "No one can save Silver Wing's virtual idol project." 2 days after he said that, Duan Chenji got wind of it, and the entire virtual idol team was purged. The few students he had managed to get in were kicked out. Glyphets' reputation was tarnished, and he became a laughingstock among his peers. But given that Silver Wing had never had a strong presence in virtual projects, many media outlets didn't dare say anything definitive. Whether it was due to Glyphets or Silver Wing's own internal rot, there was no conclusive conclusion. Until the appearance of Polar Light at the end of the year reminded many people of last year's fallout with Glyphets after the failure of Silver Wing's virtual projects. Unfortunately, some people wanted to interview Glyphets, but they found that the master was too far away and did not accept online interviews. They couldn't find him for a while, so they could only make wild guesses in the daily reports. Jingang was a long way from Qian, the political and financial center of Yangzhou. Jingang did not pay much attention to the entertainment industry, so the buzz in Qian did not affect Jingang. This was also the reason Glyphets had chosen Jingang for his recuperation. In fact, Glyphets was hit hard by the failure of his project last year, but he didn't think it was his fault. His illness was indeed fake. In fact, he was fine a long time ago. Why hasn't he been discharged? Firstly, it was to show that he had given his all in the virtual reality project last year. He had given it his all and put in all his effort. He had gotten sick from exhaustion, and it had been quite a serious illness. It was to give people the impression that he was diligent and dedicated. Showing weakness at the right time would make public opinion more biased towards him. Secondly, He was too embarrassed to show his face. The failure of last year's virtual reality project was indeed a stain on his reputation. So he was waiting for Silver Wing's virtual reality project to be released this year. If the virtual reality project was still half dead, people would surely think that no one could save Silver Wing's virtual reality project. That way, there would be a lot less people blaming him. Everyone would also think that Silver Wing had tarnished his reputation and caused him to be hospitalized. Glyphets had been waiting since the beginning of the year. He hadn't heard anything from Silver Wing until he got wind that Silver Wing had given the virtual reality project to a newcomer. At that time, he had actually breathed a sigh of relief. Even Silver Wing itself had given up, no longer investing heavily in virtual reality projects. Therefore, no one was willing to stir up that pool of stagnant water. This wasn't a problem with the producer. It was a problem with Silver Wing itself. But now, the dagger was revealed. More than half a year, 3/4 of time. Silver Wing definitely had a backup plan. That was why Glyphets had been investigating. He didn't believe that Silver Wing would really give the virtual reality project to a newcomer. Silver Wing can fool others, but they can't fool me. Duan Chenji must have been prepared. Ding. Glyphets received a text message. Glyphets' eyes lit up as he read the message. He seemed to be deep in thought. "Teacher, any news?" the young man beside him asked. "The second movement will be out before November." Glancing at the date, it was already October 25th. It should be out in the next 2 days. Glyphets had set up a few watch lists. If there was news of the second movement, he would be the first to know. The first movement was just a prelude. The second movement would reveal Silver Wing's goal. Was it a continuation of the epic? Or was it a publicity stunt? Glyphets knew that whether he could make a comeback depended on the second movement. Silver Wing headquarters in Qian City. Fang Zhao held the finished music video in his hands and shouted to the studio, "Zhu Wen, come up with me." "Up where?" Zhu Wen yawned. He was in desperate need of a game to relieve his fatigued nerves. "Top floor," Fang Zhao replied. Zhu Wen's legs turned to jelly when he heard the words top floor. "Top floor?" Fang Zhao checked the time. "Hurry up and get ready. We'll be up in 5 minutes. Director Duan is waiting." Even though Silver Wing had let Fang Zhao handle the music video himself, they still had to show the finished product to the higher-ups. Silver Wing was starting to take this seriously. The success of the second movement would determine Silver Wing's next move. This was what Duan Chenji had reminded Fang Zhao when she allocated the funding. Fang Zhao needed a technician. Zhu Wen was the studio's top technician, so Fang Zhao would bring him along. If there was anything to do, Zhu Wen would have to do it himself. Hearing that the big boss was already waiting upstairs, Zhu Wen felt his legs turn to jelly, but he didn't dare waste any time. His hands were shaking as he washed his face. All he could remember was the cold expression on the faces of Duan Chenji and the other higher-ups at last year's failed project summary meeting. Every project employee had been scolded like a dog, not daring to say a word. They all wanted to curl up into a ball. After tidying up a bit, Zhu Wen followed Fang Zhao into another elevator. "Boss, I'm nervous." Deep breaths couldn't relieve the tension. Zhu Wen felt the temperature in the elevator drop. "Think about it. After the second movement, we'll be able to buy gaming equipment." "No way. The more I think about it, the more nervous I get." "What if it fails?" Zhu Wen was so nervous his teeth were chattering. When he turned his head and saw Fang Zhao's usual demeanor, he suddenly felt puzzled. Fang Zhao's calmness wasn't fake. He really wasn't nervous. "Boss, I have a question, but I don't know if I should ask," Zhu Wen said. "Don't ask me if you don't know. But I can't hold it in." Zhu Wen looked at Fang Zhao. "Why aren't you nervous?" "If the second movement fails, of course, I'm not doubting its quality. I actually like it, but will others like it? Will the people at the Yangju Music Association give it a good review? Will the Polar Light project really succeed? Every time I think about it, I get restless, sleepless, and restless. Don't you feel anything?" Fang Zhao pointed to his head. "Because every time the background music plays in my head, I feel fearless. That was true on the battlefield, and it was true now. Zhu Wen looked at Fang Zhao. He was sure Fang Zhao wasn't joking. It's hard to understand. What's in your head? Chapter 37. Zhu Wen felt that people like Fang Zhao did not understand what it meant to be nervous or apprehensive. At least, Zhu Wen had never seen Fang Zhao panic. Actually, if Fang Zhao had been an ordinary person, or the him from before the apocalypse, he would have had the same reaction as Zhu Wei. However, people who had experienced the apocalypse would definitely change. Fang Zhao could be nervous and afraid, but during the end of days, people had to find something to hold on to. Otherwise, they would collapse. Some people did it for the sake of their loved ones, while others did it for the sake of their beliefs. Even if they didn't have any beliefs, they would still find a substitute. During the early stages of the apocalypse, Fang Zhao still had some family members, but during the middle stages, all he had left were his comrades. Some people would look for companions, but most of the time, it would be a moment of sweetness, and the next moment, it would be eternally separated. There was no lack of hysterical cries in the apocalypse. Having seen so much sorrow and joy, people would become worried about personal gains and losses. After that, Fang Zhao led his team to battle all over the place, and he had no other thoughts. It was also the environment of the end of days that gave Fang Zhao an ability. It was as if his brain had been split into two halves. One half was used for thinking and controlling his body, while the other half. Just as Fang Zhao had said to Zhu Wen, the other half of his brain probably contained an orchestra. At first, it was a small orchestra that played bits and pieces from time to time. Later, it expanded into a large orchestra that was sometimes impassioned and sometimes heavy. Gradually, no matter what he did, some music would play in his head. It was like a kind of hypnosis, making him forget other emotions, forget nervousness, forget timidity, and prepare himself to die every time. Over time, he got used to it and became numb. Compared to what he had experienced in the post-apocalyptic era, this was nothing. Fang Zhao wasn't nervous. On the contrary, he was looking forward to it. When he walked out of the elevator, it was still the spacious but cold corridor that led to the conference room. Zhu Wen was a step behind Fang Zhao. He didn't dare let his eyes wander. He controlled his wobbly legs to prevent himself from collapsing. Compared to the previous time, there was one more person standing guard in front of the office this time. Although it was just a simple verification of identity and they did not say a word more, Fang Zhao still saw something familiar about them. These two were from the army. Actually, when Fang Zhao had joined Silver Wing, he had discovered that many of Silver Wing's security guards were retired soldiers. There had been rumors that Duan Chenji's husband was from the Yangju military, but no one knew his exact position or rank. In short, because of the Yangju military background, Silver Wing's security guards were basically all retired soldiers. Walking into the conference room, there weren't as many people as the previous time. Including Fang Zhao and Zhu Wen, there were exactly 10 people. After Fang Zhao and Zhu Wen entered, the door to the conference room was shut, isolating the voices inside. Other than the 10 people in the conference room, no one knew what was being discussed inside. It didn't seem to cause any splash. In the afternoon, the department in charge of publicity received a series of sudden orders. The original publicity plan was completely changed, and they were to follow the new publicity plan. Some of the publicity channels that many people coveted also had their rankings changed. Someone cut the queue. Usually, unless it was an emergency, the pre-arranged publicity order would not be changed. After all, there were too many implications, and when the order was changed at the last minute, there were bound to be special circumstances. For example, someone enjoying special treatment. In the past, those who could enjoy such special treatment were A-rated stars and above. But this year, when the publicity department received the new publicity plan, they were stunned. This? Not an A-rated star? It's actually that virtual idol. Are we really going to do this? Are we going to start the publicity now? But this is too much. Isn't the company afraid of a repeat of last year? Regardless of what the people at the bottom thought, they still had to follow the arrangements from above. Love Go Little Say Net W changing publicity spots. changing the order of the advertisements, and so on. Everything was in motion. The next day, Yenzhou's public transportation, plazas, buildings, and other places all had a slightly different kind of advertisement. It couldn't be helped, it was just too eye-catching. Among a sea of pretty, handsome, and cute faces, the sudden appearance of one with a unique style would, of course, attract more attention. Amid the impassioned music of divine punishment, a still image appeared. The image was separated by lightning. On one side of the lightning was an army of tree people, and on the other side was a horde of mutated creatures. Below the image was a row of eye-catching words: 100-year period of destruction, second movement, released on November 1st. The media, which had been waiting for Silver Wing's follow-up, was suddenly on steroids. They had expected Silver Wing to promote the virtual idol in advance, but they had not expected it to be on such a large scale. This level of promotion was comparable to that of an A-rated star, right? B-rated stars and below certainly could not enjoy this kind of treatment. Not only did it appear in real-life places with high traffic, but it also appeared on the internet. Was he really going all out? Who would have thought that Silver Wing would actually put so much effort into a virtual idol? Even the virtual idol project that Silver Wing had invested heavily in last year had not received such a level of promotion. Although Silver Wing had promoted the virtual idol last year, it had given off a feeling of lack of confidence. This year, however, Silver Wing seemed to have suddenly straightened its back. On the public train, a few students looked out the window at the huge screen floating on the walls of the skyscrapers. "Is that the upcoming movie?" a student asked. They were too far away to see the words on the screen. "No, it's a virtual idol released by Silver Wing. But this idol is a little special. Have you heard of divine punishment?" "Yeah, my school used to play it every day. But I'm not interested in that genre, and I haven't watched the music video. I quite like it. Is the second song coming out?" Another student did some online research. "November 1st. Haha. Soon, soon. I hope the second song is also epic. Let me tell you, you have to use good headphones or sound equipment to listen to this kind of epic. Otherwise, you won't be able to hear it." On the internet, other than those who like to listen to this style of music, the most active people were those who had the mentality of picking up gold bricks. The second song is also an epic, right? Right. I hope so. You guys don't know, but every time I listen to Divine Punishment, I feel like I'm listening to the sound of gold. When the time comes, we'll see what the Music Association says. If it's true, we'll release it. Is the second song only available for download in the Yangzhou region? If it is, I'll wake up laughing. Nowadays, other than our Yangzhou, music like this is copyrighted and not available for download. Many movie soundtracks can't even be found online. This time, Silver Wing did not hold back on the promotion of the second movement. They announced the release date ahead of time. This was not only a promotion for the virtual idol, but also a declaration of war against the other two companies. November 1st, I'll be waiting here. Fight me if you're not happy. The big boss of Tongshan True Entertainment, Song Shihua, sat in his office, silently pondering Silver Wing's true motive for taking this step. He did not believe that Duan Qianji would throw out an epic just to prove that Silver Wing could prop up a virtual idol. He was a businessman, and so was Duan Qianji. From a businessman's perspective, Song Shihua firmly believed that Silver Wing was after something big. What was it for? Suddenly, Song Shihua's fingers froze. His pupils constricted and his cheeks twitched. He was doubtful and in disbelief. Every word was squeezed out of his mouth. Could it be for next year's release of Battle of the Century? Other than that, he couldn't think of any other reason. Battle of the Century was the most anticipated game in the world, bar none. It was the game that gamers around the world had been anticipating for close to a decade. And the game was set during the 100-year period of destruction. And the production company of Battle of the Century had already said that Battle of the Century would only be endorsed by one virtual idol in each continent. The endorsement fee was secondary. What was important was the impact the endorsement would bring. That was global. Silver Wing wanted to use that tree to compete for the Battle of the Century endorsement. What a joke. Based on that tree? Chapter 38. It had to be said that Song Shihua had guessed Duan Chenji's intentions. Why had Silver Wing invested so much money and manpower on virtual idol projects last year? Supporting a virtual idol to prove itself was one reason. Another reason, from a business perspective, was the endorsement deal for Battle of the Century. Battle of the Century's production company, Fiery Bird, produced a game every 10 years. Each game lasted 10 years. It was a very capricious and powerful company. Fiery Bird was founded 100 years ago. It was rumored that the founder used to make flying machines. Their first game had something to do with spaceships. That year, it had taken the world by storm. For 10 years, it had never fallen out of the gaming world's top 3 most popular games. 10 years later, Fiery Bird released a second game. Its popularity almost duplicated that of the first game. Duan Chenji wasn't sure. She didn't play games, but she knew that the legend game Fiery Bird released 9 years ago had netted more than 100 billion in net profit. No one knew the exact figure from Fiery Bird, but it would definitely not be less than 100 billion. This was only the income from the game itself and did not include the derivative products. Even so, it was enough to make many people jealous. Many people wanted a piece of this big cake. Furthermore, every celebrity that had been endorsed by Fiery Bird in the past 100 years had become very popular and famous on a global scale. Why did Neon Culture and Tongshan True Entertainment, of Yenzhou's Big Three, seem to be better than Silver Wing? Virtual idols were definitely the main reason. When it came to real celebrities, Silver Wing would not lose, but when it came to virtual idols, Silver Wing was a disappointment. Previously, Neon Culture and Tongshan True Entertainment had both had virtual idols win endorsements for Fiery Bird. Because of this, in terms of global influence, Neon Culture and Tongshan True Entertainment were slightly stronger than Silver Wing. Virtual idols were a force to be reckoned with. This was something Duan Chenji had always wanted to change. Silver Wing had to release a sufficiently well-known virtual idol to overcome this predicament. But Duan Chenji hadn't told Glyphets or anyone else about her plan. Maybe there were people in the company who had guessed Duan Chenji's intentions but didn't say anything. They didn't have the confidence, and Silver Wing didn't have a virtual idol that could compete for the endorsement deal. It just so happened that Fiery Bird's 10-year anniversary was approaching. Last year, they had announced the name and background of their new game, Battle of the Century, set during the period of destruction. Other than that, Duan Chenji had also found out through her own means that Fiery Bird had invested even more into Battle of the Century than Legend. From a businessman's point of view, the greater the investment, the greater the projected income. Tongshan True Entertainment had clearly used MIU, a popular virtual idol among young people, as an endorsement candidate. Last year, Glyphets had led Silver Wing's virtual idol team to produce a female virtual idol, just like MIU. She had perfect looks and a voluptuous figure. Unfortunately, the market did not accept it. Tongshan True Entertainment had stirred up trouble behind the scenes, but the project's failure was not solely due to interference from other competitors. The problem with the project itself was the key. MIU was already a hit, and her popularity showed no signs of subsiding. The market didn't need a second virtual idol like her. That was why Neon Culture's new virtual idol was playful and cute, unlike MIU. The failure of last year's big investment project had put an end to Duan Chenji's desire to compete. Of course, she wasn't in a good mood. Why was Zhu Wen so afraid of Duan Chenji? Because Duan Chenji's outburst last year had been too scary. Anyone who had been there would never forget it. But now, Duan Chenji, who had planned on giving up on creating virtual idols and competing for endorsements, had encountered Fang Zhao's polar light. This ignited Duan Chenji's desire to give it a shot. She even blocked Flying Pegasus's strong objections and let Fang Zhao use his epic. As long as Polar Light could stand up, she would pay. In addition to the 50 million she had allocated, she also had other departments cooperate. She would give special privileges. It was just a dog in the office. It was just a gym, right? Fine. Gaming equipment. As long as the second movement was a success, she would build a gaming room for him. Fang Zhao's timing was too coincidental and too good. Now that she had a chance to compete, she could only look forward to Fang Zhao's performance. On the 50th floor of Silver Wing Media. Even though the second movement had been completed, for the sake of secrecy and other reasons, nobody went out much. They rested on the 50th floor. They had nothing to lose here. They could work out, play online, and play games. They wouldn't get bored. When the second movement was officially released on November 1st, they could go out and party. Of course, the premise was that the second movement was a success. Otherwise, forget partying, they might even lose their jobs. Divine Punishment has finally broken 10 million downloads. The second movement shouldn't be too shabby. Zhu Wen wasn't in the mood to play games. Every day, he stared at the Divine Punishment download count and cheered himself on. They would definitely succeed. Bonus and gaming equipment, the two things he valued the most, were pinned on the second movement. The first movement, Divine Punishment, had been downloaded more than 10 million times. Not everyone was a fan of epic music. Some people downloaded it because they wanted to follow the trend, while others wanted to take advantage of the situation. But no matter what, it had been a long time since a new idol's debut song had been downloaded more than 10 million times. Outside and inside the industry, all media outlets were reporting on the news. But in the industry's creative circles, they didn't think it was worth it. If they chose to open their music to the public, they wouldn't be able to compete in the film and video game market as copyrighted music. Also, putting it on a public platform would be beneath them. However, they had to admit that Divine Punishment had been downloaded more than 10 million times, and they were indeed very surprised. In the past, there had been people who put epic music on a public platform, but the number of downloads had barely broken 1 million. After all, in the fast-paced modern world, not many people were willing to calm down and appreciate the deeper meaning behind the music. But this type of music had found a better home. Music was an important part of the soul of games, movies, and commercials. Regular music couldn't sustain the scene, so epic music or something like it caught the eye. Through copyrighted music, music producers could earn millions or even tens of millions of dollars. Over time, this type of music maintained a cool and aloof style. Epic music has never been associated with a single virtual idol before. Even during the golden age of virtual idols, the reg era, this had never happened. Polar Light's debut had attracted a lot of attention. The right time, the right place, and the right people. Fang Zhao had all three. He couldn't have achieved this result without any of them. No matter what people thought, no matter if they praised or criticized Silver Wing's methods, they were all staring at the date, waiting for the arrival of November 1st. October 31st. Chu Guang, who had just squeezed into fourth place, was dumbfounded when he saw the company's promotional schedule for November. Again. Right, Fang Zhao's song is part of the same series? Chapter 39. November 1st. This was a day that many people in Yenzhou's music industry paid close attention to. It was also a time that a portion of the entertainment industry paid close attention to. Could Silver Wing maintain the quality of the first movement? The big boss of Tongshan True Entertainment, Song Shihua, was already waiting in his office, which was equipped with a full set of top-notch audio and video equipment. As long as he watched the second movement, he would be able to confirm his suspicions. Had Silver Wing invested even more in the second movement? If that was the case, then it was obvious that Silver Wing wanted to use Epic to promote Polar Light, the virtual idol, to compete for the game's endorsement deal. 8 o'clock. This was the working hours of many companies, and it was also the breakfast time before the morning classes of many schools. The new era was divided into 3 levels: elementary, middle, and high school. Each level lasted 6 years. Elementary education was equivalent to elementary school before the apocalypse, while secondary education was equivalent to the combination of junior high and high school. Higher education was education after high school. It was similar to a university, but it also involved more in-depth teaching. At this moment, many students from Chi and City's secondary education schools were biking or taking public trains to school, heading straight for the school cafeteria. The welfare of new era schools was not bad. The food was good and cheap. Rushing to school for breakfast in the morning, then rushing to class was a daily routine for many students who did not live on campus. At this time, regardless of whether the students lived on campus or not, they all ran to the cafeteria one after another. Chian City No. 1 Secondary School, North Point Cafeteria. Every day at this time, the big screen on the wall would play some fast-paced and powerful songs to refresh the students. Places like the middle school cafeteria were noisy to begin with, so the soothing songs could not be heard at all. They might have long been drowned out by the noise, leaving only a few unclear tones. November was the time when the majority of Yenzhou's secondary education schools welcomed their midterm examinations. Schools placed a lot of importance on these kinds of large-scale examinations. The students sitting in 2s and 3s eating breakfast in the cafeteria were complaining about their studies, homework, life, and budding relationships. Some people were drinking soup while replying to their classmates. From time to time, they would glance at the big screen in the cafeteria to see if there were any videos they liked. It's the same thing every day. I can guess what's next even with my eyes closed. In the era of high-tech network communication, people already knew too many things when they were still young. The more they grew up, the more they felt that there were fewer and fewer things that made them feel fresh. The videos and songs on the big screen might have been interesting at first, but boredom would come quickly. How long had it been? They were already impatient. The person who was about to stop looking at the screen suddenly heard the exclamation of the classmate beside him. Look, the aurora. Where is it? Someone looked around. Big screen. Oh right, I almost forgot. Today is the 1st of November. The second song of Polar Light is coming out. The media had once done an investigation and found that the students who accepted divine punishment the most were middle school students, not advanced education schools. Although students in the middle education period were at a restless age, they were not as impetuous as students in the higher education period who were close to the edge of society. It was also a more sensitive period of time. Perhaps it was because of this that they were more easily moved. November 1st, 8 a.m. The second movement of the 100-year period of destruction series was released online. At first, the overall color of the image was gray, but the image was very clear. The screen in the cafeteria was big enough. The projection equipment and hardware were all advertisements for each school, so the quality was naturally not bad. At the same time as the image, a nervous, fearful, and uneasy music played. A continuous bass note and repetitive rhythm paired with electronic music that was not so harmonious and pleasing to the ear created a gradually oppressive feeling. From a traditional perspective, electronic music weakened the musicality of the song, blurring the boundaries between music and sound. However, it increased the sensory stimulation of the music, giving listeners a feeling of curiosity and apprehension. It was as if the human soul was communicating with the earth of the end of the world through music. The 100-year period of destruction was a time and space that originated from reality yet was not reality. In the second movement, Fang Zhao used even more electronic elements. If the first movement was a success of electronic music paired with orchestral music, then in the second movement, electronic music was completely integrated into the music. Human society had developed into the information age. Compared to before the end of days, the standard of living and the state of mind had undergone huge changes. In the information age, technology was highly advanced. Automation and artificial intelligence were already commonplace. Accompanying these developments were all sorts of mechanical and electronic sounds. These sounds filled life in the new era, and people were already used to them. Music in the new era took advantage of this and incorporated it into its music. People's aesthetic standards were changing, and so were their preferences and styles. Even the so-called trends were changing. Electronic music produced more timbre and sound. Compared to traditional instruments, electronic elements were more reflective of this era and were more easily accepted. Therefore, composers in the new era either used electronic materials or used traditional instruments to complement electronic music. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Fang Zhao incorporated these new things into his own compositions, incorporating metallic and electronic sounds into his music. After all, music that transcended time might not be easily accepted by the masses. The first movement, Divine Punishment, sounded like a different kind of classical music to many people. It was just the right amount of novelty to attract people. But if it was too much, it would be rejected. In the North Point cafeteria of Chian City's No. 1 secondary school, the clamor had died down. More people were paying attention to the image on the big screen. Because the cafeteria was always noisy, the sound system was even louder. As the noise died down, the music became more distinct. The image showed a gloomy sky with dripping rain. Behind the scene of devastation, a bass violin played a lyrical melody. The horn sounded mournful, drawn out, and carried a deep sense of helplessness. It seemed to be a mixture of tragedy and desolation. The expectations of the Treants, who had chosen to leave their homeland and find a new place to live, were shattered time and time again. The world was full of danger. They didn't know where they were safe, and they didn't know if there was still a peaceful place for them to live. Their companions who had left with them either died of illness or were torn to death by mutated beasts. The Treants were riddled with scars. Disappointment, boredom, and decadence permeated the air. To them, life was at its lowest point. Their original conviction to find a new place to live had given up in the face of cruel reality. Long-term feelings of fear and helplessness were about to swallow their consciousness. The classical style of loss and numbness conveyed the emotions of despair and terror. The low harmonies were set off by the somewhat gloomy orchestral music, pressing forward step by step. There seemed to be a voice whispering in their ears, "Do you see that?" The low harmonies carried with them the tension of an undercurrent of danger. It spoke of the coldness and ruthlessness of the end of the world and the powerless wailing of life. The figure at the front of the Treants had many scars on its body. Its branches had obvious scratches and breaks, and the green leaves on its branches had become sparse. It was a sorry sight. In front of them was a hillside. On the hillside were the figures of some bloodthirsty and evil beasts. Behind them were the tribes that had been dealt a heavy blow by the cruel reality. Behind the heavily colored image was the gentle sigh of a bass string. It seemed that everything would end with this sound. "Look, the world is already like this. There is no hope. Give up, don't go forward. Find a place to hide and pray that your luck can last long enough. Live one day at a time." The surreal image mixed with the orchestral and electronic music created a grand sense of absurdity. It carried with it the repeated powerlessness of struggle. It was as if they were standing at the bottom of the abyss looking up at the cold and cruel arrangements of the heavens. Just being strong was no longer enough to support them to continue resisting this fate. There was no neutrality in this era. A large amount of electronic music brought about a strange sound effect. The rhythmic and ever-changing percussion music played continuously. The flickering vibrating sound of a piano and the desolate and rich voice of a solo male bass. The figure at the front of the Treants walked forward. After 2 steps, he turned to look at the tribe. No one was following him. He looked ahead. There was already a figure bearing fangs and brandishing claws running towards him. In the North Corner cafeteria of Chian City No. 1 High School, there was almost no sound of conversation. The people who had already brought their spoons to their mouths had even forgotten to drink. Their eyes were glued to the image on the big screen. The cafeteria chefs were softening their movements. The atmosphere in the cafeteria was tense. It was as if a string was being pulled back and forth in the brain. In the video, the lonely figure walked up the hill. The already gathered branches on both sides tightened and twisted again, forming sturdy arms. The roots also twisted to form a sturdy and powerful pair of legs. The strings were pulled back and forth. It was as if the heart was resisting and escaping. It was like the surrounding air, undetectable but always enveloping the surroundings. The 2 parts of the music seemed to be intertwined with different forces and emotions. It was as if there was a heavy cocoon binding the figure. Every step was so difficult. Everything has been depressed. Where is the light? Following fate. What is fate? Where are the people of the past? Sorrowful homeland. Life in the apocalypse would be sad and melancholy, but it would also struggle and resist. Lightning flashed in the dark clouds in the sky. The wind gradually became stronger, and the rain gradually became heavier. The orchestral music was like a crazed howl that gradually intensified. The heavier drumbeats were like the rumbling of thunder, indicating an even stronger storm. The drumbeats, orchestral music, double bass, and some electronic elements played a very layered melody. The ever-changing male voice hummed with a solemn and stirring meaning. It was as if a deeper power was about to explode. The figure walked forward alone. His brown pupils contracted. He looked at the approaching reddish-brown beast that looked like dried blood. He bent down to pick up a stone from the ground and held it in his hand. The strings were like the sound of taut branches. With a big step, his body leaned forward. He raised his arm that was made of twisted branches high. The hand holding the stone formed a suffocating arc in the air. Like a ferocious hammer, he smashed it towards the figure that was pouncing at him. Bang! A heavy drumbeat exploded. It was as if the ferocious figure in the video had been smashed, or as if it had smashed something invisible. The figure in the video panted as he looked at the threat that was smashed. The sound of the piano repeated over and over again. It was as if his mind was confirming something. The rising melody behind him made the atmosphere less heavy. He finally realized that many things were not as scary as he imagined after he faced them bravely. The world would not be disturbed by them. But that was it. The sun had set today, but it would rise tomorrow. Although the sky was covered by a thick layer of smoke, he knew that the sun was still there. He lifted his foot and stomped heavily on the body of the fallen beast. He completely cut off the chance for it to open its sharp teeth again. He stepped on the sharp claws and fangs that they were once afraid of. He turned back to look at his tribe. He walked forward again. He threw away the stone in his hand and picked up an even bigger stone stick. He walked towards the second beast. He changed from walking to running. His clumsy body became more agile. It was as if he had gotten rid of the heavy cocoon that had been covering his body. The world in the storm. And you. The deep male voice became bold along with the rhythm of the battle. In the majestic atmosphere of the orchestral music, this was the most natural, most primitive, and most direct way of expressing music. Fight. There was no other choice. In this era, someone had to stand up. Not cower. Not cower. Fight against this absurd and cruel fate to the end. Life in the apocalypse stood in the abyss. They followed the darkness and chased after the light, climbing upwards. Faith was a thing that was as deep as still water. It was also soul-stirring. It was unusually beautiful, but it was also bloody. Under the fusion of the epic orchestral arrangement and electronic sound, apart from the tension and momentum that could topple mountains and overturn the seas, there was also a sudden surge of untamed hostility. Music and images were a temptation that no matter which era it was, no one could resist. The electronic music elements were perfectly integrated into the grand orchestral system. The image combined with the sound. Everyone who saw and heard it felt as if someone had suddenly put a block of ice on the back of their neck. It was so stimulating that they shivered. Their hearts felt as if they were being set on fire. Their emotions felt as if they had been smashed and then stitched back together. The human-like figure in the image was a body made of twigs and branches. It was as if it was covered with muscles that were full of explosive power. Every step it took was accompanied by a heavy drumbeat, like the sound of a war drum being beaten with great force. The figure that got rid of the heavy shackles was like a strong and fierce leopard. With a powerful step, it swept across the ground. Its body soared into the air and swung its arm at the figure that was pouncing at it. The strength was even more powerful than before. The flow of time seemed to slow down. The broken stone shards from the stone rod carried traces of blood. It shuttled through the rain. The splashing muddy water exploded in all directions, drowning the broken tooth. The music seemed to explode fiercely in the cold light. There was no longer a stirring melody. The fusion of electronic music and extended metal orchestral music brought with it a power that gripped the heart. It was like an unsheathed knife, cold, sharp, and heavy. It was a coldness that had been stripped away from the gentle. The seemingly discordant harmonies followed the high-pitched male voice. It sounded like a shout or a roar, but the unconventional musical combination brought more intense sensory stimulation and oral shock. More instruments were added to the mix, and the music reached its climax through superposition. Every note surged with unyielding passion of life. The zither notes were like a gust of wind. After spiraling upwards, they whistled and soared into the sky. The audience couldn't help but tremble. It felt as if an ice-cold electric current was coursing up the tailbone. All the pores on the body were about to explode. The figure holding the stone rod didn't look back this time. There was no need. He could already hear the footsteps following him. Stepping on the bodies of the beasts, he continued forward. Behind him, a second pair of feet and a third pair of feet stepped on the bodies of the two beasts. During the end of days, the 100-year period of destruction, it had been an era of heroes. Many people thought that Fang Zhao had chosen a species that had appeared during the period of destruction and used a cheap trick to create a virtual idol with epic music. But Fang Zhao's choice of the dragon elephant Tianluo tree man, Polar Light, was actually a metaphor for the generation that had been born in a peaceful era but had spent most of their lives fighting for survival during the end of days. The cruelty of the end of days didn't just lie in the slaughter of life, but also in the trampling and destruction of the human spirit. It tore apart the body and spirit, and it made light of life and made a mockery of it. During the period of destruction, the heroes that had been widely praised and even deified by the people of the new era had lost their heroic colors and lofty sentiments. In fact, they had been ordinary people with a reasonable desire to survive. For fame and glory? What a joke. Back then, they had only been fighting against death. It was the harsh life of survival and combat that had turned them into iron-blooded heroes. Their roots were born from the earth. That was why Fang Zhao had chosen Polar Light. The image on the screen gradually panned up. The heavy rain continued to fall. Behind the figure at the front, a few figures gradually walked out from the group of trees. Their branches were twisted into a sturdy form suitable for combat. They stepped on the mud and the corpses of the berserk beasts on the ground as they followed. The orchestral music carried a tense rhythm. The strings were strumming rapidly at the same pitch. The surging momentum spread out along with the wider field of view on the screen. Under the thunderstorm, there was a terrifying aura on the verge of eruption. The image and music stopped abruptly, and the ending credits appeared on the screen. MV main character, Polar Light species, Dragon Elephant Tianluo song title, 100-year period of destruction second movement, Cocoon Breach producer, Fang Zhao production team, Polar Light project team, Fang Zhao, Zhu Wen, Song Miao, Pang Pusong, Zheng Huang, WNU, Fu Yingtian, Stiller, Zhong Yu, etc. Production company, Silver Wing Media. The quiet cafeteria only became noisy again when other songs started playing on the big screen in the cafeteria. I feel like I can blow up the cafeteria right now. I don't know why, but I suddenly feel a strange sense of mission. Master, give me 2 more bowls of rice. I'm going to the battlefield after I'm full. There were still 3 exams left. Coming. The cafeteria chef in charge of collecting rice vigorously waved his ladle. Outside the cafeteria, a few students who had just arrived saw the people rushing out of the cafeteria. What's going on with them? Someone who had just arrived asked his companion. There was a murderous vibe. Did they just make a midterm vow? Making a vow in the cafeteria? They're probably second graders. Don't mind them. They're always like this. Neurotic. That's not right. I just saw some 5th graders. Chapter 40. After the second movement, Cocoon Breach, was released, it had nearly 100,000 downloads in less than a minute. These were all people in the industry or related industries who had been waiting for a long time. The online media were all waiting to write their reports after they finished listening and reading, afraid that someone would beat them to it if they were a step slower. However, after listening to the second movement, they were momentarily at a loss. He felt that there were countless words in his heart that he wanted to say, but he did not know where to start. Chu Guang and the others had also been waiting in the projection room for a long time. As soon as the clock struck 8, they hurriedly downloaded the movie and turned on the projector. It was almost the same situation as last time. No one made a sound during the screening. Even after the screening, no one spoke for a long time. Sitting in his chair, Chu Guang took a deep breath and closed his eyes. He knew he couldn't keep his fourth place. Chu Guang felt a tinge of regret and defeat, but when he thought of the two virtual idols from Neon Culture and Tongshan True Entertainment, he felt a tinge of satisfaction. Those two virtual idols would also lose their second and third places. Knowing that none of them would recover, Chu Guang felt his depression dissipate. He accepted the fact that he wasn't as skilled as others, but he was still happy to see the two virtual idol teams from their rival companies suffer. Just as Chu Guang thought, Zun Huai and Phyllis' team were now worrying about what to do next. Should they change their development plans? The big boss of Tongshan True Entertainment, Song Shihua, smashed his cup in his office. That's what Silver Wing is after. Although Tongshan True Entertainment should not be afraid of Silver Wing snatching the endorsement, Song Shihua was starting to worry. Based on the two movements that had been released so far, the 100-year period of destruction was indeed not to be underestimated. Either of the two movements was enough to support a big-budget movie. What was even more coincidental was that it was the theme of the end of the world. The game Battle of the Century, which would be released next year, was also about the end of the world. Would Fiery Bird choose a more popular virtual idol, or one that fit the theme better? Song Shihua really didn't dare to say for sure, nor could he guess. You want to fight for the endorsement? Let's see if you have the ability. Song Shihua gathered the executives of the Virtual Projects Department and held an emergency meeting in his office. The meeting lasted for half a day. However, outsiders did not care what Song Shihua was planning. They were all waiting for the Yangju Music Association's response. Without their approval, the rest of the industry would not dare to jump to conclusions, even if they felt that the second movement was not inferior to the first. The person who had evaluated the first movement as an epic was Ming Kang, the vice president of the Yangju Music Association. At the same time, Ming Kang was also the former principal of the Qian Academy of Music. The Qian Academy of Music had yet to make a move, waiting to hear Ming Kang's evaluation. Otherwise, if they were urged by the media to give a different evaluation from Ming Kang, it would be embarrassing. The people at Silver Wing also had their eyes on Voice of Yangju, because they were the authorities in the entire Yangju music industry. That was also why no one doubted the epic of the previous movement. The Yangju Music Association might have many unsatisfactory things, but as long as it was released on the official website, there would be no flim-flam. It represented the entire Yangju Music Association. No one dared to make a run at the official website over a personal grudge. If they wanted to make a run at the association, they would do it elsewhere, such as accepting an interview from the media. On the 50th floor of Silver Wing Tower, besides Fang Zhao, the rest of the Polar Light Project team was staring at Voice of Yangju. Why isn't it out yet? It's almost 9. The last time it came out around this time. It shouldn't be any slower this time. I'm nervous. Zhu Wen stared at the screen, his hands clasped together, his thumbs circling each other. He no longer cared about the number of downloads. What he cared about was the final evaluation from the Music Association. If the number of downloads went up but the evaluation was not high, it would not be a complete success. Glancing at Fang Zhao, who was calmly surfing the web, Zhu Wen wanted to ask something, but he closed his mouth again. Forget it. Who knew what background music was playing in Fang Zhao's head? After 9 o'clock, Ming Kang's much-anticipated evaluation did not come. Instead, the other deputy chairman of the Music Association, Dina, did. Chairman Ming is a little agitated, so I came out first. Dina's smiling face appeared on the official website of Voice of Yangju. Dina's words confused many people. Why was Ming Kang so agitated? It was just listening to a song. Was there a need to be so agitated? However, Dina's ranking was not lower than Ming Kang's. In terms of seniority, Dina was Ming Kang's senior and belonged to the older generation of artists. Having this person's evaluation was even better. Dina usually did not evaluate the work of a newly debuted idol. Only a few big-name stars or songs that were more widely sung could be evaluated by this senior. However, Polar Light's case was a little special. After all, Ming Kang had given the first movement an epic evaluation. Dina's curiosity had been piqued. He was also waiting to hear the second movement that day and was willing to come out and give his evaluation. All the media in the industry perked up their ears, afraid to miss the evaluation of this senior who was over 100 years old. Many people have asked me whether the second movement of the 100-year period of destruction, Cocoon Breach, can be evaluated as an epic. As for this question, everyone's ears perked up even more. Let's put this question aside for now. Let's talk about epic, Dina said unhurriedly. The media, who had been preparing to intercept the crucial information for publication. People who knew Dina well wanted to roll their eyes. This old man was still the same as always. He would take a detour midway through his speech, and no one knew when he would come back to it. He was just toying with people. Dina did not care what others thought. He kept to his own pace. The smile on his face faded as he began to explain in a more serious manner. Epic can be traced back to a time before the period of destruction. Whether it was the early art of singing or the folk songs that were passed down through the generations in the royal court, military camps, and public gatherings, they were all forms of epic. After the period of destruction, in the early years of the new era, there were many epics that praised the 100-year war. However, as time went on and life became more stable, no one listened to them anymore. Nowadays, as long as it is something that can stir people's emotions, it is easy to call it epic. But many people forget that in the earliest days, epics were created to praise heroes. Following that, this senior explained the history, development, and changes in modern styles of the epic from various professional perspectives. Everyone in the media looked like they were suffering from constipation. They could not help but urge him in their hearts. Can't you be more straightforward? Come up with a conclusion before explaining so that we can publish our articles. However, the professionals listened attentively. This helped them understand the composition and instrumental arrangements of the two movements. Life itself is a process of falling and getting back up again and again. The second movement also starts with depression and then lifts. Its purpose is to make use of the flow of musical notes to give people hope amidst the heaviness. Another thing worth mentioning is that the second movement, which is less than 4 minutes long, has hundreds of tracks of virtual instruments and audio. The arrangement and the use of vocals are all very skillful. From this, it can be seen that behind the second movement, there was a very skilled symphony mixer and electronic music arranger. However, I do not recognize the skills of those I am familiar with. I am also very curious about this. Professionals knew that when it came to mixing and arranging, the slightest negligence could cause discomfort to the senses. For example, too many changes in the melody, too much dissonance in the harmonies, and so on. All of these could be magnified as unsociable. Looking at it this way, the mixer and arranger behind the scenes were quite amazing. The only question was which two of them were they. Thus, as the media waited and waited, Dina finally said, "It is indeed worthy of being called epic," and rushed to publish their articles. But people in the creative circle, including Dina himself, were curious about the composer behind these two songs. Was it really the legendary newcomer Fang Zhao? Also, who were the symphony mixer and electronic music arranger? Chapter 41. Research on the contents of the second movement was only valued by professionals. Most people only needed the word epic. The second epic. The industry was shocked, not just because of the song, but because they realized that Silver Wing was determined to use epic to promote virtual idols. Was it worth it? That was the question on many people's minds. It was also the question raised by many media outlets after Dina, the deputy head of the Yangju Music Association, rated the song epic. Lin Dun, Silver Wing's chief spokesperson, responded to the questions posed by the media. Remember history, remember the martyrs. Song Shahua. Haha. Who are you trying to fool? You make it sound so grandiose, but your goal is still to compete for the endorsement deal. Even people who didn't know about the endorsement deal were skeptical, let alone people like Song Shahua, who had already guessed what was going on. Just for these 8 words, he did not hesitate to throw in a huge sum of money and 2 epics. He might even throw in more epics on this project in the future. Regardless of whether others believed it or not, that was the explanation Lin Dun gave. On the 50th floor of Silver Wing Media, Zhu Wen and the rest of the team were ecstatic after hearing Dina's evaluation. The success of the second movement meant more bonuses, a brighter future, and, "Boss, can we apply to the higher-ups for gaming equipment?" Zhu Wen asked at the top of his lungs. At this moment, the suspense in his heart had already been lifted. His entire body felt light, and he wished that he could go out and go crazy. However, he still remembered the most important thing. "I've already applied," Fang Zhao said as he browsed through the online comments. What did the top floor say? The rest of the team looked over. Approved. Someone will be here tomorrow to install it. Ahahaha. Zhu Wen cackled. Nothing was better than playing games during office hours. What kind of games? Rodney asked. Shooting games, Fang Zhao said. Shooting wasn't Rodney's favorite, but he had the same thoughts as Zhu Wei. It was enough for him to have fun and not have to be secretive about it. Jumping ship was the right decision. Fu Yingtian, Zhong Yu, and Stiller, who had been roped into the task force by Zhu Wen, were now sharing the good news with friends and family. There would definitely be bonuses. Silver Wing had always been generous when it came to rewards, so they were not worried. Now they wanted to share their feelings with others. When they were transferred from their original posts, they were under a lot of pressure. Even their families were worried. Furthermore, due to confidentiality rules, they were not allowed to speak too much about the second movement. Everyone was tense and depressed. Now, they had finally made it through. This was a fucking gold mine. Based on this trend, the success rate of the third movement was rather high. After all, they had the support of the company and a monstrous boss like Fang Zhao. They didn't have to worry about funding or the other department's attitude. Great. Didn't they all think that virtual projects were a trap? Weren't they all hesitant and jealous? Are you regretting it now? Too late. Seeing Zhu Wen and the others sharing the good news and showing off in their own circle of friends, some people in the same industry were also envious. If they had known this would happen, they would have applied for a transfer to the virtual projects department as well. Unfortunately, the department was temporarily closed. Even if they wanted to, it would be difficult. Silver Wing's official live broadcast channel also featured Dina's comments on the second movement. The host even smiled and thanked Neon Culture and Tongshan True Entertainment for their praise of the second movement, which had boosted their popularity. Without it, they would not have been able to garner the attention they currently had. However, there were also some negative comments from some media outlets. The reason the first movement of 100-year period of Heaven Punishment had so many downloads was because Polar Light's debut had never been seen before. The novelty was too strong. Everyone listened to it and downloaded it for the novelty. But when the second movement came out, the novelty wasn't as strong. Epic, no matter how high its style was, could only be regarded as a relatively niche style in the music industry. It did not conform to the popular style of the general public. There should not be many people in modern society who could understand it. At most, they would listen to it when watching a big-budget movie. Another analysis was that when the first movement was released on the public platform, many people would download it as a bargain. But when the second movement came out, people would feel that the price had depreciated. Not as many people would buy it this time around. It wasn't just one media outlet that thought so. Rare goods were expensive. Too many of them made them worthless. Some copyrighted music studios called for Silver Wing to stop before it went too far. What they were trying to say was, don't let the download numbers drop and embarrass the copyrighted music industry. Don't let the epic depreciate as well. However, while these people were complaining, there was another group that was attracting attention. People who paid attention to intermediate schools noticed that there had been a sudden trend on many campuses. Many people were listening to Cocoon Breach. Some listened to Divine Punishment and Cocoon Breach together. They listened to it after waking up in the morning, after breakfast, before problem solving, and even during breaks. Recently, they had been in high spirits. At first, they thought that it was just the students in the second year who were emotionally sensitive and jumpy. But later, they realized that this phenomenon wasn't only limited to the second year. There were many in the other grades as well. Especially when the midterm exams were approaching, This demonic wind was particularly fierce. Many school teachers were puzzled. They really didn't understand the minds of high school students. Because of the high school phenomenon, some media outlets had reported on it. Silver Wing was also helping to hype it up. But soon, Neon Culture and Tongshan True Entertainment started to fight back. MIU and Andy Leo team up in return from peril. Melancholy Prince Andy Leo turns into a tough guy and fights for justice. Rumor has it that MIU will be disfigured in the film. A barrage of news reports brought up the topic of Silver Wing, but it was quickly overshadowed by Yenjo's two biggest virtual idols. In the new era, virtual idols were the same as real idols. Both could star in movies. The only difference was that one was computer-generated, while the other was performed by a real idol. What? MIU will be disfigured? How can my invincible beauty, MIU, be disfigured? Project team, please explain. Begging for Andy Leo's tough guy photo. A collaboration between a good-looking man and a beautiful woman was always exciting. But Duan Qianji hadn't expected Neon Culture and Tongshan True Entertainment to choose a collaboration. MIU and Andy Leo were Tongshan True Entertainment's and Neon Culture's most popular virtual idols. In terms of virtual power, Silver Wing couldn't compete with MIU and Andy Leo in terms of fanbase. Everyone had to admit that. But Duan Qianji wasn't in a hurry. She didn't ask for more publicity to counterattack. She was waiting. Song Shihua was delighted to see that the online discussion of Polar Light and Cocoon Breach had died down. He sat in his office, sipping a glass of wine. Although Tongshan True Entertainment and Neon Culture were competitors, virtual idol endorsements were supposed to be between the two companies. Silver Wing wanted to poke their noses in. Let's see if they got it right. Look, as long as they could hype up the virtual idols, Polar Light, Cocoon Breach, and Epic would all be sidelined. He wanted to show the people at Silver Wing what it meant to be a real popular virtual idol. What was the difference in power? Peril Rebirth was a movie he had planned long ago. It was a period of destruction-themed film specifically for MIU. The goal was clear: to attract Fiery Bird's attention. But 2 days ago, Neon Culture had approached to discuss a collaboration, and Song Shihua had agreed after some consideration. No matter what, he had to squeeze Silver Wing out first. He had a hunch that if Polar Light really rose to prominence, they would be under unprecedented threat. Neon Culture must have sensed this, too. That was why they were discussing a collaboration to suppress Polar Light's rise. As he contemplated his next move, Song Shihua's comms device buzzed. He glanced at it. It was an urgent message. The sender was one of the company's vice presidents. Normally a steady man, he seemed to be in a hurry. Something happened? Song Shihua quickly opened the message. Old Song, watch voice of Yangju. Ming Kang has spoken. Chapter 42. Even though Dina, a more senior industry veteran, had already commented, many people were still looking forward to Ming Kang's review. Even epics had their own classifications. In Ming Kang's eyes, was there a difference between the first and second movements? Other than that, Dina had said that Ming Kang was too emotional to comment on the other day. What had gotten the association's deputy chairman so worked up? Therefore, even though Ming Kang hadn't commented in 5 days, many people still paid attention to Voice of Yangju, which was founded by the Yangju Music Association. The moment Ming Kang appeared, everyone took notice. In the video, Ming Kang appeared to be in good spirits. His eyes glowed with unconcealable joy and excitement, which confirmed what Dina had said 5 days ago. My apologies, these past 5 days have been the most exciting I've been in my 60+ years. Ming Kang's voice trembled as he spoke. A hand holding a teacup reached over. Although only a hand was visible, anyone familiar with Ming Kang's family knew that it was his wife. Ming Kang's words had been a bit of a joke. Wasn't the most exciting 5 days the few days of his wedding? But from the video, it was clear that Ming Kang's wife agreed with him. Just what could have caused this couple to be so agitated? The astute Prairie Fire chief editor immediately sent word to his staff to investigate Ming Kang's recent movements. In the Voice of Yangju live broadcast studio, Ming Kang accepted the tea, calmed himself down, and continued speaking in a steady tone. Many people know that I spent the first 50 years of my life busy with music and my career. When I was 51, I married Professor Su Tong of the Arrangement Department at Chian Academy of Music. When I was 52, we had our own child. But God played a joke on us. He's a little different from other kids. At this point, many people recalled that Ming Kang had been a promising young man. He had become the principal of Chian Academy of Music at 49. In the new era, where lifespans had doubled, he was considered young. Ming Kang had been hailed as a genius from a young age. And Ming Kang's wife, Su Tong, had been a celebrity at the time. She had come from a musical family and was brimming with talent. She had been famous at Chian Academy of Music. But not long after their son was born, he had been diagnosed with Hull virus. Since then, the rapid advancement of science and technology in the new era had greatly improved medical treatment. 95% of the diseases from the period of destruction had been cured, but close to 5% remained. Even if they could be treated, they would only provide limited relief. Hull virus was that 5%, and there was basically no cure. It was born during the period of destruction. The infected seemed to have lost all emotions and became as numb as a stone. Although they had no other physical defects, they needed external help to eat, drink, and defecate. They could not speak, and their eyes were lifeless, as if their soul had been sucked out of them. Their entire brain was like a fully equipped machine that refused to work. During the apocalypse, a doctor by the name of Hull was infected. He spent the rest of his life researching the virus and chose to provide his body to the laboratory for research after he passed away. Later, people called the virus the Hull virus. Perhaps in the eyes of many people, naming an extremely dangerous virus after someone was a curse, but for some of the people who researched viruses at that time, it was a kind of honor, such as Hull, a madman in the eyes of later generations. The Hull virus could be transmitted through the air. Although it didn't survive long in the air, it could hide in plants, animals, and even microorganisms. It was impossible to guard against. At first, many people used complicated filtering methods to prevent it. But later investigations revealed that the probability of Hull virus infection was less than 1 in 10 million. Gradually, people came to the conclusion that the probability of Hull virus infection was less than 1 in 10 million. Later on, no one used such a strict and complicated filtering method. And yet, the less than 1 in 10 million chance of Hull virus had been encountered by this couple. If it was possible, they would rather such a thing happen to them than to their newborn son. When they heard the news, they almost broke down. Ming Kang resigned from his hard-won position as principal ahead of schedule. Su Tong also resigned. The couple took their son all over the world to seek treatment. But each time, they received the same response: no cure. No cure. Nothing could be done. Friends and family who were close to Ming Kang and his wife could still remember that the couple had been on the verge of shattering at the slightest touch. Based on the lifespan of the new era, the young, promising couple had silver streaks in their hair. How could two geniuses have met with such a mishap? Many people sighed. If this had not happened, Ming Kang might still be the principal of Chian Academy of Music. The principal of Chian Academy of Music served one term every 5 years, but it was not uncommon for a principal to serve 2, 3, or even more terms. Ming Kang had the ability. Others mocked that the couple must have used up all their good luck in the last 50 years to encounter such a mishap. It was a 1 in 10 million chance, yet these two people had actually met. It was a scar in the couple's heart that no one dared touch, because the slightest touch would cause it to bleed profusely. But now, Ming Kang had brought it up on a live broadcast. Song Shihua, who was watching the live broadcast, had a bad feeling. On the live broadcast channel, Ming Kang himself was overcome with emotion as he recalled the events of the past. His eyes reddened. From despair at the beginning to acceptance. It's been 12 years. There's nothing that can't be healed. Our children are growing up, and so are we as parents. I thought the rest of my life would continue like this. At this point, Ming Kang's tone became excited again. A month ago, I listened to a song. To be more precise, I listened to a movement. Song Shahua's fingers tightened around his glass as he watched the live broadcast, as if he was about to crush it. Many people watching the live broadcast also perked up their ears and stared unblinkingly at the screen. Here it comes. Those who know me well know that I rarely listen to the new artist chart. Every time I listen to a song, I share it with my son, Ming Yi. Even though people infected with the whole virus could not respond, Ming Kang still shared the music he listened to with Ming Yi and offered his opinions. It was as if Ming Yi was no different from any other child. It had been like this for 12 years. By chance, I saw the song Divine Punishment recommended by Silver Wing. The first thing I saw was the image of a tree. I was a little surprised at the time. It was the first time I'd seen a virtual idol in the form of a tree, so I watched the music video. Based on the quality of Divine Punishment, there was no doubt that it was excellent. Even though I'm no expert in analyzing symphonic compositions, I could tell there were many areas worth studying. As usual, after listening to the song, I shared my opinions with my son before writing a review. But when I turned my head and met my son's eyes, I noticed a tiny ripple. It was as if someone had rubbed a small dot on a window that had been covered with a thick layer of dust. Before Ming Kang's brain could react, tears began to flow without warning. He was afraid that what he'd seen was an illusion. After all, his son's eyes betrayed too little emotion. If not for the fact that he and his wife spent every day with their son and were so familiar with him, no one else would have been able to detect this tiny ripple of emotion. So Ming Kang replayed the video, downloaded it, and played it again and again. After confirming it, Ming Kang was very excited. He immediately invited a professor in Qian who specialized in virus research during the period of destruction. That was why Ming Kang had only given a brief review of Divine Punishment without a detailed analysis. He was busy getting someone to diagnose it. Ming Yi's brain did react a little, but it was too subtle to draw a conclusion. Ming Kang switched to another song, but it didn't elicit any reaction from Ming Yi's brain. Now the professor's interest was piqued. If a second song can elicit the same reaction, we might be able to find more clues, the old professor said. Seeing a glimmer of hope, Ming Kang contacted Duan Qianji. He wanted to know who the composer of Divine Punishment was. Could they arrange a meeting? Duan Qianji declined, but told Ming Kang that the second movement was in production and would be completed in October. It should be released in November. After waiting for 12 years, they could afford to wait another month. Ming Kang could understand Duan Qianji's thinking. From a businessman's point of view, exposing the composer of a virtual idol at a time like this was detrimental to their interests and would disrupt their original plans. From a composer's point of view, the composer was probably in the middle of composing and accumulating inspiration. Ming Kang didn't dare interrupt them. He knew all too well the pain of being interrupted in the middle of a composition. One careless interruption and they would never be able to find the original feeling again. If he lost this rare glimmer of hope because of his impatience, there would be nothing he could do even if he cried. After a month of torturous waiting, the second movement was finally released. That morning at 8 o'clock, Ming Kang's family was on standby. His wife, 2 professors specializing in hull virus research, and their research team were present. The second movement was clearly a step up from the emotional outburst of the first movement. During the month of waiting, Ming Kang had studied a number of symphonic songs, but none of them had elicited the slightest emotional reaction from Ming Yi. But when the second movement, Cocoon Breach, was played, Ming Yi's eyes revealed an even more obvious emotional reaction. If the first movement was like a small dot on a dusty window, then the second movement was like a large, clear handprint. This level of emotional reaction would only cause a fleeting flicker in the eyes of other people, but on Ming Yi, it was like a boulder falling to the ground. It was frightening. Ming Kang, who was in his 60s, was like a traveler on a long journey who had finally been relieved of a heavy burden. He knelt on the floor in exhaustion and covered his mouth, afraid that his excited scream would scare away the emotion in Ming Yi's eyes. Ming Kang's wife, Su Tong, was sobbing hysterically in the soundproof room next door, as if trying to release all the pent-up emotions that had been building up over the years. At the time, Ming Kang's forehead was pressed against the floor. He looked like he was smiling foolishly, but his face was covered in tears. It had been 12 years. The pressure of public opinion and the pressure of their own hearts had almost crushed the couple several times. They had searched for 12 years and hoped for 12 years. They had been prepared to wait and search for the rest of their lives. But now, they had found the person they wanted. Sorry, I was too emotional again. Ming Kang, who had stopped reminiscing, wiped the tears off his face with a trembling hand. He took a deep breath to calm himself down, then looked straight at the screen. I know that many people want to hear my evaluation of the second movement, but I'm sorry, I can't objectively evaluate it. To me, it is God. First-year students at Chian Academy of Music. 5 days ago, after Dina had given his evaluation of the second movement, Cocoon Breach, the teachers from the composition, arrangement, and mixing faculties had assigned a topic to the first-year students. They were to write a paper analyzing the second movement, Cocoon Breach, from their respective professional perspectives. This would serve as their midterm examination, and the papers would be handed in 10 days. When they heard that the former principal, Ming Kang, was going to give a review, they had rushed online to collect as much analysis as they could. But now, they were dumbfounded. What? I wanted to hear you talk about music, but you're talking about illness? After some discussion, the first-year students from the composition, arrangement, and mixing faculties submitted a joint request for the teachers to change the midterm examination topic. The reason was Chapter 43. No one could have imagined that the debut of a new virtual idol would gradually spiral out of control. When freshmen at the Chian Academy of Music changed the topic of their thesis at the last minute, not a single teacher at the academy dared to comment on Cocoon Breach. In terms of qualifications and industry standing, they were no match for Dina and Ming Kang. Even if they did comment, they could only add their own reflections to Dina and Ming Kang's comments. They would be slapped in the face by all sides if they went against the style. They wouldn't do it. You didn't have to like the style, you didn't have to listen to the two movements, but there was no denying that they had indeed triggered some astonishing and surprising results. The influence of Cocoon Breach was no longer limited to the music industry. The medical community was probably in an uproar. At the end of Ming Kang's speech on the voice of Yangju, Ming Kang included a still photo of his son, Ming Yi, listening to Cocoon Breach. Compared to normal people, it wasn't that obvious. It was like a normal, apathetic person's eyes flashed. But when you thought about how Ming Yi was a 12-year-old Hull virus patient, it was inconceivable. Some people who thought Ming Kang was exaggerating changed their minds. Ming Kang, his wife, and the two old professors were there. There was no way the photo could be faked. It was actually real. Ming Kang beamed at the photo before he went offline. Keep up the good work, my little sapling. You have to stay strong. There was nothing wrong with describing his son as a little sapling. Just as Ming Kang himself had said, because of his son, he was no longer able to objectively evaluate the virtual idol and the person behind it. Therefore, he would no longer publish any relevant comments on the voice of Yangju. The voice of Yangju could not carry heavy personal sentiments. When the next movement came out, he would analyze it from his own point of view. Perhaps there would be even more surprises then. Thank you, Polar Light, the Polar Light Project, and the composer behind Polar Light. Although I don't know who you are, I hope to thank you in person after this series of movements is completed. Ming Kang felt it was a pity. Duan Qianji still refused to divulge the identity of the composer, but she did tell him that there were still 2 more movements. When the 2 movements were completed, Silver Wing would naturally disclose the identity of the composer. There were still 2 more movements. These were the 2 pieces of good news that Ming Kang had heard. He could not wait any longer. He also told Duan Qianji that before the 2 movements were released, he would not ask about the composer. At the same time, he also hinted to Duan Qianji not to let anyone else replace him. There were many such things in the creative circle, and Ming Kang did not want anyone to impersonate his benefactor. No one knew the private conversation between Ming Kang and Duan Qianji, but Ming Kang's last words on the live broadcast channel made many people start to think again. Who is that composer? There was only one composer for Divine Punishment and Cocoon Breach. Not a team. This made those who had previously speculated that Silver Wing's flying Pegasus had intervened flabbergasted. If there was only one creator, who was it? With such a strong foundation, he shouldn't be unknown. Just which expert from the silver-winged Pegasus was he? However, industry insiders who knew silver-winged Pegasus had other guesses. The style of the two movements did not seem to be the work of someone from silver-winged Pegasus. In any case, it was not someone they were familiar with. Love go small say net who could it be? Of course, this was the focus of attention in the music industry. Outside of the music industry, the focus of the medical community was on how the two movements had triggered Ming Yi's brain activity. It was said that Yangju had already sent out invitations to form a research team to study the whole virus treatment. That afternoon, the popular entertainment media show Prairie Fire invited an expert on the live broadcast to solve the mystery. Prairie Fire's chief editor had a keen sense of smell. He had already sensed an opportunity when Ming Kang had only said a few words. He had sent someone to investigate and then spent a fortune to invite an expert from the Yangju Academy of Sciences to analyze the mystery for the public. Many people who were interested in this, as well as those who were still skeptical, were waiting in front of the screen. Many people know that sound waves can stimulate animals, but in fact, sound waves can also stimulate some plants. Some can promote the growth of plants, and some can inhibit their growth or even kill them. Whether or not it can stimulate those plants depends on whether or not it can trigger their musical sensitivity. Music is a kind of rhythmic, elastic mechanical wave. When it propagates through a medium, it also produces some chemical and thermal effects. When music stimulates plant cells, all kinds of biochemical reactions in the cells are also affected. The Academy of Sciences professor even compared music to the body of plants and animals. In other words, every note or section of a piece of music might correspond to a particular amino acid molecule in the body of a plant, and proteins are made up of amino acids. Therefore, from the perspective of industry insiders, a piece of music is like an orderly arrangement of amino acids to form a complete protein. This way, when the plant encounters this protein, when it encounters a particular piece of music, a special enzyme in the plant's body becomes more active, thereby stimulating the biochemical reactions in the body. The professor explained a lot. Some people understood, others only understood, but that didn't stop them from guessing. In other words, this wasn't a publicity stunt. It really was possible. If plants and some low-level animals could be stimulated, it would be even easier to do it to humans. The whole virus was born during the period of destruction, and Divine Punishment and Cocoon Breach were both part of the 100-year period of destruction series. They hadn't seen previous songs about the period of destruction elicit a similar reaction. In other words, it had to do with the two movements. In the past, people had tried using sound waves from music to stimulate the brains of people infected with the whole virus to see if the on-strike machine would respond, but the results were minimal. Now they knew it wasn't that there was no effect. It was that the right piece of music had been chosen. Just like how enzymes work with substrates, only the right one would work. I really want to see who this musician is that's trying to steal our livelihood. On the program, although the Academy of Sciences professor sounded like he was demanding repayment, his expression was one of joy and anticipation. Music and medicine were two different fields, and they were both busy with their own things. However, since the composer had helped them knock on the door and pointed them in the right direction, it was up to them to decide what to do next. This meant that they had found a way to tackle a virus that posed a huge threat to humanity. Although they didn't know when it would actually be eradicated, finding a way to do so was a good thing. The first step had been taken, and it was only a matter of time before the rest was completed. Big news. This was something all the media in the industry would pay attention to, regardless of whether it had anything to do with entertainment or medicine. It involved a human disease that had yet to be conquered. Naturally, it would cause quite a stir. The media busied themselves. What about the report on Miu and Andy Leo? The junior reporter holding the interview drafts of the two popular virtual idols was in a difficult position. Sigh, how can we pay attention to that right now? Let's postpone it for now. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Gather more information on the two movements and the whole virus. Keep an eye on Ming Kang's movements and compile a press release. News about the two virtual idols, which hadn't been easy to get traction for a few days, was overshadowed by news about Polar Light, Divine Punishment, Cocoon Breach, and Hull Virus. Inside Tongshan True Entertainment's chairman's office, Song Shihua smashed his newly replaced teacup. Song Shihua regretted it. He should have killed Polar Light during the first movement. Now it was too late. They could do whatever they wanted in the Yangju entertainment industry, but things had already spiraled out of his control. Polar Light's rise was unstoppable. What could he do? Poach him? Chapter 44. Song Shihua wanted to dig up the real composer behind the two movements. At first, he had wondered if it was the newcomer that Silver Wing had put on the table, but after confirming Silver Wing's target, he dismissed his original suspicion. In his opinion, Silver Wing would never give such an important project to a newcomer. Song Shihua scanned the ending credits of the MV over and over again. He asked his subordinates to investigate everyone listed in the credits. In the end, he came to a conclusion: the project team's name list was definitely incomplete. Silver Wing had hidden the most important part. Many people shared Song Shihua's opinion. According to industry rules, at the beginning, only the producer of the virtual idol project would be identified. The producer of the virtual idol project was equivalent to the director of a movie. As for who composed the music, who wrote the lyrics, who arranged the music, who mixed the music, who sang the vocals, and so on, there would be no indication. Any words that might distract from the popularity of the virtual idol would be restricted. Only when the time was right and the virtual idol was pushed to the top would the company disclose the detailed division of labor behind the scenes. Therefore, even if everyone wanted to know who the composers, remixers, and arrangers of the two movements were, based on the information given in the MV, there was no way to tell. Furthermore, most people believed that only the technical staff had been released. The composers, arrangers, and remixers had all been hidden away by Silver Wing, probably because they were worried that someone else would poach them. Yenzhou's coastal Jinggang city, inside a sanatorium. Master Glyphets, the famous musician and virtual idol producer, was sitting by the window of his room as usual. However, he had not been in the mood to enjoy a nice sunbath for many days. He kept staring at the communicator in his hand. The wrinkles on his forehead were deeper, and his face was haggard. This time, he wasn't faking it. He was really sick. When the second movement, Cocoon Breach, was released, Glyphets had almost been sent to the intensive care unit. His hopes of making a comeback were dashed with the release of the second movement. Ming Kang's words made things worse for him. The more attention Silver Wing's virtual idol Polar Light received, the worse his situation became. His chances of making a comeback became slimmer. Many in the industry were already mocking him for his failure last year, saying he was worse than a newcomer. "You haven't found out?" Glyphets asked the three people standing beside him. They were all his apprentices. 2 of them had been purged from the virtual projects department by Silver Wing. Glyphets' voice was a little hoarse and suppressed, but also a little sharp. Every word was said very slowly, giving an extremely gloomy feeling, like a rusty gear that had been stuck and was forced to turn a full circle. Hearing this, goosebumps appeared on the arms of the 3 disciples. "Not yet." One of the disciples answered with his head down. The other 2 shrunk their necks and pretended that they didn't exist. Glyphets had asked them to investigate the real composer behind the 2 movements. It could be said that the composer was the key to Polar Light's success. However, even after using their own means and some of Glyphets' connections, the 3 of them still couldn't find out who the real creator was. Actually, it wasn't just them. The majority of Silver Wing's internal staff only knew that Fang Zhao had taken on the project, but they didn't know who the creator was. "No." Glyphets seemed to be both responding to them and muttering to himself, his eyes unreadable. After a moment of hesitation, Glyphets waved his hand and gestured for the 3 of them to leave. The 3 disciples were relieved. Not daring to ask any more questions, they hurried out of the room. Glyphets was the only one in the quiet room. The afternoon sun was nice, illuminating the room. The flowers in the vase still had their delicate colors, adding a bit of liveliness to the room. But now, the room was so quiet that one could hear breathing, but there was a chill in the air. Glyphets keyed in a number in the encrypted mode of his communicator. About 15 seconds later, the call was picked up. "What is it?" The person on the other end seemed to be very careful, keeping his voice low. Before Glyphets could say anything, the person on the other end hurriedly added, "If it's about the Polar Light project, I can't tell you. Duan Chenji is keeping a close eye on me. I don't want to be kicked out just yet." It was a senior executive at Silver Wing who had a personal relationship with Glyphets. In the past, he had reaped many benefits with Glyphets' help. "No, I know you're in a tight spot, so I can't say much. I just want to know about the Polar Light project. Who is the composer of the two movements?" The person on the other end was silent for a few seconds, then said hesitantly, "Duan Chenji specifically instructed me not to tell anyone. I just want to know." "I won't say much," Glyphets said, knowing that the other party was also apprehensive. "I swear, I won't tell anyone." This time, the person on the other end was silent for a long time, as if hesitating. Glyphets didn't rush him, he just waited quietly. After a minute of silence, the person on the other end lowered his voice again. "It's Fang Zhao." "Who?" Glyphets stood up in shock, almost losing his footing. After regaining his balance, he asked again. "The one you know, the newcomer." "Impossible. It's up to you to believe it or not." "Why it can't be? Silver Wing gave such a huge investment to a newcomer. How could a newcomer?" Glyphets didn't want to believe it. "I'm warning you, keep it to yourself. Don't tell anyone, or we're both done for. You know what Duan Chenji is capable of." With that, the person on the other end of the line hung up. In a warm, spacious room, Glyphets slumped into a recliner, letting the communicator slip from his hand. He sat there in a daze, like a stone waiting to melt away. Suddenly, Glyphets shivered. He felt a chill run down his spine. Fang Zhao. The newcomer he'd checked, who had just joined Silver Wing this year. He remembered that guy. He was in his early 20s, barely a third of his age, fresh out of college. That little brat had actually forced him into this predicament. If Fang Zhao had known what Glyphets was thinking, he would have told him, "I'm your daddy." Regardless of what other people thought, and regardless of how industry media clamored to find the real composer, Fang Zhao wasn't in the mood to deal with the media. He cooperated with Silver Wing's response and stayed in the company unless necessary. He wanted to play games. The game equipment he'd requested from Duan Chenji was finally ready today. There were more than a dozen game props that looked exactly like real guns. These were difficult to obtain because they were too similar to real guns. They were even more stringent than film and television props. However, Duan Chenji's husband was in the military, and she had her own connections. If she really wanted to get her hands on them, she could get her hands on real guns, let alone game props. Some of the company's security personnel were legally allowed to carry guns. Duan Chenji had given the virtual projects department 20 days off. During this time, Fang Zhao's attention would be on the game. As he watched the installation crew install the equipment in the room, Fang Zhao's communicator rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Fang Zhao walked to his office and picked up the call. "Hello, is this Fang Zhao?" An unfamiliar male voice asked. "That's me." Fang Zhao walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked at the flying cars coming and going from the 50th floor. "I'm Beavis, a B-grade agent at Neon Culture. Are you interested in joining us? Don't worry about Silver Wing's breach of contract. We can take care of that for you. As long as you're willing to join us, we'll arrange for you to sign a contract immediately. You'll be treated like one of our B-grade stars. You'll have priority in promoting your works within a year, and you'll be mentored by a master. Of course, if you have any other ideas, we can discuss them." Beavis was very confident. The conditions he had laid out were hard for many newcomers to enjoy. In his opinion, Fang Zhao was just a figurehead in Silver Wing's virtual projects department. He might as well jump ship to Silver Wing's company and enjoy more substantial benefits. Actually, there were other conditions he could offer, but he wanted to see Fang Zhao's reaction first. If Fang Zhao was interested, he would continue. Neon culture. Fang Zhao had thought that Tongshan True Entertainment would be quicker to act. He hadn't expected Neon culture to make the first move. Fang Zhao also knew why Neon culture had made such a move. Since they couldn't find out who the real composer of the two movements was, they had to poach a few known members of the project. As the composer, Fang Zhao was naturally the first target. While Song Shihua was still debating whether to make a move, Neon culture had already approached him. Beavis from Neon culture? Where did you get my contact number? Fang Zhao asked. He was using a new number that the original owner of his body had created when he left school and moved to the Black Streets. It was different from the one on school records, so not many people knew about it. Speaking of which, it's fate. We have a fellow countryman in the newcomer department. You should know him. Fang Sheng? Yes, that's him. Do you think it's fate? Haha. While researching Fang Zhao, Beavis had discovered that Fang Zhao and another newcomer in the company, Fang Sheng, had come from the same hometown, gone to the same primary school, and attended the same high school. After asking around, he found out that the two actually knew each other. But when he asked Fang Sheng for Fang Zhao's contact number, Beavis didn't pay much attention to Fang Sheng's sour expression. He assumed that Fang Sheng was upset and didn't think much of it. Indeed, fate has brought us together. Fang Zhao chuckled softly. He stared out the window with a cold gleam. Why don't you ask Fang Sheng who the real composer of those 3 songs is? Chapter 45. Although Beavis was angry that Fang Zhao had hung up, he was even more puzzled by what Fang Zhao had said before the call ended. Who is the real composer of those 3 songs? What are the 3 songs? The real composer? Could it be that Fang Sheng wasn't an original writer? Beavis wasn't a rookie, so he didn't know much about the newcomers department. He had only skimmed through the company's newcomers this year. If not for the fact that the higher-ups were trying to poach Silver Wing's talent, he wouldn't have bothered investigating. But even if he didn't know much about the newcomers department, he could deduce a few things from Fang Zhao's last sentence. Beavis sat in his office with a dark expression, thinking for a while. After contacting the newcomers department, he pulled up all of Fang Sheng's files and read them carefully. The more he read, the darker his expression became. If he had doubted Fang Zhao's words earlier, now that he had read the files, he believed Fang Zhao's words a little more. Fang Zhao had graduated from the Qian Academy of Music, arguably the best music academy in Yangzhou, while Fang Sheng had graduated from a school in Qian that was neither too good nor too bad. This was secondary. Actually, the company didn't necessarily require a newcomer to graduate from a good school. Even if the newcomer was a bottom feeder and flunky, as long as the newcomer had a particular forte in the musical arts, the company would consider him. That was to say, setting aside external factors like background and connections, the most important factor was genuine talent. Fang Sheng had been noticed and signed by the newcomers department because of the 3 songs he had submitted. Although Fang Sheng's files didn't have much to say about him, his grades weren't outstanding, and he didn't have a record of winning awards, the 3 songs had convinced the newcomers department to sign Fang Sheng. The 3 songs might not have been top-notch, but they were slightly better than the average newcomer. One of the 3 songs had performed well in the new talent contest. The company had wanted to give him a boost, but Fang Sheng hadn't submitted any new material yet. Beavis called Fang Sheng and Fang Sheng's agent over. His sinister gaze swept over the two of them. Beavis usually wore a smile on his face, but when he pulled a long face, it was a frightening sight. Fang Sheng's agent, who had been rudely summoned by Beavis, was still a little resentful. Although he was a newcomer, he had managed stars with B-level contracts before and had been with the company longer than Beavis. Beavis's tone when he summoned him was not the least bit harsh. He did not treat him like a senior. But now, looking at Beavis's expression, he knew something was wrong. "What's up?" Fang Sheng's agent asked. He knew Beavis had looked into Fang Sheng's background, but he didn't know why Beavis had called them up. Beavis ignored the agent. His dark gaze swept over Fang Sheng like a knife. "I just want to know who the original composer of the 3 songs you submitted when you joined the company was." Fang Sheng, who was already nervous, felt his heart skip a beat when he heard this. His back broke out in a cold sweat. The muscles around his mouth twitched, but he didn't know what to say. He didn't make a sound. His fists clenched uneasily. He sensed his agent's suspicious gaze and knew he couldn't hide it. He tried his best to hide the guilty expression on his face and forced a smile. "Did you hear someone say something? Don't believe him. Those 3 songs were written by me." "Oh." Beavis didn't say anything more. He looked at Fang Sheng's agent. His eyes seemed to say, "You can do whatever you want with the person you signed." The agent stared daggers at Fang Sheng. He managed at least a few dozen people, if not 100. He might not be as capable as Beavis, but he had good judgment. The change in Fang Sheng's eyes couldn't escape his notice. It was panic, guilt, cowardice, lack of confidence. Once Fang Sheng's agent became suspicious, it made sense of what had happened in the past. The arranger of those 3 songs had told him in private that Fang Sheng's understanding of the songs was a bit fuzzy and not thorough enough. He had thought Fang Sheng was a newcomer and had some shortcomings. A little more training and guidance would be enough. But after the 3 songs in the new talent contest, Fang Sheng hadn't been able to come up with anything new. At first, he thought Fang Sheng had run out of inspiration because of those 3 songs. But now, after so long, Fang Sheng hadn't come up with anything new. That was a big problem. He might really have stolen them. He couldn't believe he had signed someone like that. He had heard of similar cases of theft or plagiarism. Some were publicized, some were hidden. The outcome depended on the individual's ability and the company's decision-making. Of course, the safest way was to avoid such people. The bigger the company, the more it cared about its reputation. It would take a lot of manpower and resources to clear its name. But he had never imagined something like this would happen to him. Since he had signed a contract, even if it was a mistake, he wouldn't publicize it. Doing so would be a slap in the face. At this critical juncture, it might even bring unnecessary trouble to the company. He had to get rid of Fang Sheng as soon as possible. In the future, even if Fang Sheng's theft was exposed, they could take care of it in advance and deal with it calmly. According to the contract, Fang Sheng had signed for 3 years. During those 3 years, if Fang Sheng was fired for no reason, the company would compensate him 3 times his earnings. It wasn't that he was fired for no reason, but the reason couldn't be disclosed. They had no proof that Fang Sheng had stolen someone else's songs, and Fang Sheng wouldn't admit to it. Based on the total number of downloads of the 3 songs, 3 times that amount was more than 10 million. They weren't willing to pay that amount. Even if Neon Culture didn't care about the money, they weren't willing to waste it on something like this. So, after a friendly negotiation, Neon Culture agreed to pay Fang Sheng 1.5 million and Fang Sheng would leave Neon Culture immediately. The negotiation was handled by Fang Sheng's agent. Beavis didn't say anything, which meant he approved of the arrangement. If Fang Sheng had stolen someone else's songs, it was most likely Fang Zhao's songs. Actually, even if they could confirm Fang Sheng had stolen Fang Zhao's songs, as long as Fang Zhao didn't have a presence and Fang Sheng had potential, they wouldn't have fired him. They might have even covered for him. As businessmen, profit was the most important thing. But now, Fang Zhao's side was clearly fearless, and Fang Sheng didn't have what they had to protect. Dismissal was a given, and it had to be quick. They had to get rid of Fang Sheng before he became a scapegoat. If people asked, they would only say that Fang Sheng had a bad character. The words bad character had a deep meaning in the industry. It could be a personality problem, such as not getting along with colleagues, or having a bad temper that affected the people around them. It could also be a style problem, such as stealing, plagiarizing, etc. The former wasn't a problem. As long as you had the ability, your personality wasn't a problem. The latter was a big problem. There were no absolute secrets in the industry. If you wanted to know, no matter how hard Fang Sheng tried to cover it up, the bad character comment on his file was enough to get him rejected by more than half the companies in the industry. Half an hour later, Fang Sheng was kicked out of Neon Culture's headquarters. Fang Sheng's expression changed several times as he received all sorts of looks. He didn't linger and left quickly. He ran to an unnoticed corner and cursed under his breath. His eyes were bloodshot. He didn't know how long it had been since he'd rested. His complexion was worse than Zhu Wen's, who'd played games 2 nights in a row. A compensation of 1.5 million. In the past, Fang Sheng would have woken up laughing in his dreams. But after enjoying the limelight and the easy money he'd made from 3 songs, 1.5 million was nothing to him. But he didn't dare go head-to-head with Neon Culture. If he'd stayed, he could have made more. He should have gotten more than that. After taking a few deep breaths, Fang Sheng glanced at his bracelet and searched for Fang Zhao's number. If he'd waited a little longer, he'd have been able to buy a song from a music student who hadn't even graduated and was in desperate need of money. Beavis's outburst had ruined all his plans. How did Beavis know he'd stolen the songs? Fang Zhao. As soon as the call went through, bitter resentment flooded Fang Sheng's mind. Fang Zhao. You're ruthless. You say we're like brothers, but you've been guarding me from behind. Other than those 3 songs, you've hidden a lot, haven't you? Ha. You're ruthless. You're ruthless. The veins on Fang Sheng's neck were throbbing. He yelled for nearly 3 minutes. His throat was hoarse, but Fang Sheng didn't hear a peep from the other end. Are you mute? Fang Sheng bellowed at the top of his lungs. 2 seconds later. Woof 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 woof. Fang Sheng was greeted by a series of barks. They were real barks, not faked. After the barks came the distinct sound of a dog's breath. Fang Sheng. So, he'd been yelling for 3 minutes to a dog. Fang Sheng was shaking with rage. The blood in his chest was on the verge of bursting out. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.